Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana had been hanging frozen tea and dainty silver spoons for over a minute now. From the outside, it might have seemed that the elderly lady was under hypnosis. In part, it was indeed so, for her mind was possessed by sad memories. Betty, you have no idea what a heavy burden loneliness is. And on this day, my nerves are on edge. In the voice of the mistress of the mansion, tears were heard, although in the mise-en-scene itself there was a great deal of feigned emotion. But dramas and tragedies were an indispensable attribute of Adriana's life, and this feature of her character was perfectly studied by Betty, who for almost 30 years managed all the affairs in the house, and now is a companion and mistress. Although the relations between the two women could be called friendly only with a huge stretch, they were bound together like Siamese twins. Betty watched her mistress while a hymn of justice played in her soul. Its fierce melodies, her inner voice sang along. The old witch got what she deserved. "And I have no pity for you." But aloud, Betty said the words with a deep sigh. "Adriana, my dear Adriana, it's time for you to calm down. Don't tear your heart out. You have to get over it. It's been so many years." The hostess, in a flurry of feelings, again grabbed the spoon, but noticing that the cup was empty, she threw the innocent cutlery, utensils, decorated with women's painting tray. The companion immediately obligingly asked for more tea. Yes, she waved her hand regally. "You can only warm it with an ordinary kettle. Electric appliances spoil the water. After this tea, I feel quite sick." Betty went to the kitchen, but she could hear her hostess talking in a low voice in the huge living room. "It's been so many years, and I still don't believe it." "That's understandable. Any mother in my position would behave the same way, because my heart refuses to believe. Ethan, where are you, my only son?" This vivid monologue was clearly intended for an audience, but the layout has long been accustomed to such outbursts of its mistress or friend, or unfortunate friend. A wave of schadenfreude was once again tossed to the surface of the gray day. Cruel words in their content. You got what you deserved. And now, for the rest of your days, you will reap the poisonous harvest sown in Iran of evil. Unlike her mistress Betty, she spoke softly, so she couldn't hear her. Adriana was unaware of her companion's true regard for her person. She was so in love with herself that she was absolutely sure that other people felt the same way about her. When some years ago, she offered her homes to the governor, the position of a friend, she had thought it made the humble woman happy. Of course, she could have refused, and there were many reasons for that. But she had accepted. Perhaps it was out of self-interest, because it paid a companion a solid monthly allowance. Or maybe the reason for consent was the desire to watch with her own eyes and the collapse of the unsinkable Titanic, as the recently deceased retired general called his wife. As a matter of fact, it is a summer house and an apartment in the city, as well as other things. Property inherited Adriana after the death of her husband. Only Without Consolation widow was not happy about such an inheritance. And Betty, when asking neighbors, they were very interested in the fate of the estate, always answered with restraint. "How could I know what the mistress was thinking? I haven't learned to read other people's minds." But curious inhabitants of the Dacha village by old habit tried to avoid the house of the general. That's why nobody dared to have a heart-to-heart talk with her. All the blame was not of Fatty in character, but a daughter. Many remember the ugly deed of the woman. Immediately after moving in with their husband in the mansion, the general was given a government dacha for eternal use for merit, but everything was managed by his wife, who was 15 years younger than her spouse. Michael Jackson himself was a cordial man, and was not averse to spending free time in good company. He also decided to celebrate the housewarming party with a bang, so he invited almost all of his fellow villagers. But the young wife did not like the feast. In the middle of the party, the woman turned off the music and started yelling at her husband in front of all the people. "Michael, what kind of rabble have you gathered here? These people are screaming like crazy. They sing dirty songs, and the child hears it all." Michael tried to stop his wife. Adriana, we sang war songs. It's the great legacy of our fathers. I don't know why they seemed inappropriate to you. Yeah, because the singers weren't in voice, or look who you got the choir from. Couldn't you have picked a different company? Think what your coworkers will say when they find out you're treating them to a drink with a carpenter and a tractor driver. This was a direct insult to those present. The offended villagers began to hurriedly disperse to their homes. Nadeau, with her arms folded on her chest, watched the scene with satisfaction. She had the conscience to accompany the process. You are right to wish the wishes of the guests. Have a good day. If you have time, be sure to come by. The general was ready to fall through the ground in shame. One of the guests was not confused and beat back the hostess unfriendly. And good luck to you, Auntie. You have a protective name that fits your character. Michael was silent at the guest's outburst, and what could he say in defense of his wife? If a man fully revealed the essence of his wife. The man himself sometimes called his wife in his heart. The messengers from Adriana. Though much water has passed since then, Betty remembers the shameful housewarming party. After all, she had been enlisted only days before that momentous occasion. Until then, she had no idea that Adriana was a bitch in the fullest sense of the word. The day after the ingloriously completed housewarming party, New Dumont wanted to quit, but Michael himself asked her to stay. The general's hobby was fishing, and the morning after the unsuccessful party he headed to the river with a simple fishing rod. Betty at that time was putting in order in the outbuilding, where she planned to settle down with her son for the time of her service with the general's couple. I hear you're from around here. Not exactly. I'm from a neighboring village. Your literate speech indicates you're an educated man. What made you agree to such, one might say, not a prestigious job? The woman laughed. Only in her laughter, there was bitterness and despair. You're right on the mark. I'm a bibliographer by training, but nobody needs such specialists today. Times are hard these days, and I have a child, and he needs to be fed and clothed. That's why I was very happy about this job. The man put aside his fishing rod and thoughtfully said, Yes, for the sake of children, we are ready for anything. I would like this parental sacrifice to be justified in the future by worthy deeds of our children. My wife said that you also have a son. Yes, my Sam will go to 5th grade in the fall, and our Ethan is in 7th. I want him to be in the military too. We've got officers on the male side of the family, but my wife is totally against it. She says the military profession is not honored today. I don't understand how one can think like that. But it's useless to prove to my wife simple truths. She's like the Titanic. She's impenetrable. The Titanic only looked like that, but it was a sad story. And Michael looked at Betty in surprise and then exclaimed, You're 100% right. So I've chosen a very poor comparison for my spouse. The man took the rod. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And please don't leave us. She's not always so abrupt. In fact, she's a very vulnerable person. Sometimes you just have to ignore her antics. I've learned that art over the years. Of course, I have no right to demand the same of you, but I'm asking you to stay. There was so much sincerity and even pleading in the tone of this strong-willed man that she changed her mind. The woman looked at her host, who strode briskly toward the river. Have you thought about yourself? Why do such good men get such bad wives? I mean, she's a real girder. Would it be interesting to see her around the general's wives? Does she behave as boorishly in the circle of her own kind? The kettle whistled loudly, followed by Adriana's equally loud shout. Betty, my light, where did you disappear, leaving me alone? You wanted fresh tea. Yes, sorry, it slipped my mind. It's all this life of unsettlement. Betty, deftly maneuvering between antique vases and cabinets, reached the center of the living room with a tray. Here's some fresh tea. Maybe we could eat something substantial. You haven't had breakfast yet today. Betty, how can I think about food on a day like this? The very thought of it is sacrilegious. Exactly 25 years ago, my Ethan disappeared. Adriana is 24 years old. It's been exactly 24 years since the day the men from the military came to you and Michael's house to report Ethan's disappearance. The hostess glared shrilly at her companion, but held back her anger. All the days have been the same to me for a long time, so it's easy to lose count. When Michael was alive, it was easier to bear. When he was gone, I was orphaned. There were sobs. Betty realized she would have to find some convincing words to comfort her. However, every year on September 12, everything went about the same way, so she was ready to comfort the mad widow from morning until evening. But contrary to this expectation, she withdrew her hand. You don't have to comfort me. I know exactly what you're thinking at this very moment. And don't interrupt me. Do you think I deserve this torment? That I'm being punished for my language and my filthy behavior? Silence. Don't say anything now, let me speak, because it is indeed time for me, as Solomon said, to gather stones. Betty froze, for it was the first time in many years that she had seen her mistress in such a state. In the words and behavior of this elderly but still attractive woman, there was not a drop on the games of youth in her eyes, with so much pain and despair that the component felt uncomfortable. After all, only a few minutes ago she had wished that the mistresses had hot coals raining down from the sky on her head. For a few seconds both women were silent, and only in the huge living room the antique clock was counting the running of time. Adriana Foyer lived in an armchair, like a metronome. When the dead are remembered, they always play a metronome. But I don't want to, and I refuse to believe Ethan died. My heart tells me he's alive, and I want to find him. And you're supposed to help me. This statement was so unexpected that Betty almost dropped the expensive tray. Betty, why are you standing there like a statue? The tea must be cold again. Betty had another remarkable characteristic. She could easily change from a formal tone to a traitorous address. It was a sign to the person she was talking to. What was the widow's state of mind? Betty, too, realized how to behave with her hostess. Adriana, if it's in my power, I'm here to help you. And if I had any doubts, I wouldn't be having this conversation today. Of course you can help me, but indirectly. You're talking so strangely today. Nothing strange, Betty. Where does he work? That's right, in the authorities, where everyone knows everything about everyone. But you and I have made a dozen or two inquiries, but we always get the same answer. And I'm not talking about Ethan. Have your Sam run it through his sources. Where do I find Kathy? Doe sipped her tea loudly with a satisfied look. They couldn't recover from her request. You want to find your sister-in-law. What's objectionable about that? It's only natural. After all, Kathy was my son's lawful wife, and I threw her out with an infant in her arms. And now I want to apologize. Yeah, I've been flooded with tears of despair again, thinking I'm a bitch. Maybe you are. But how many times have I behaved for what I did? It just happened that day. I was out of my mind with grief. And then she shows up with that baby, and she's smiling. Betty also remembers the day her mother-in-law kicked the poor girl out the door. But before that, she poured a lot of mud on the young mother's head. After all, her daughter-in-law had given birth a month before the due date, and the baby didn't look like a premature baby. Adriana then in a statement and shouted, "You fucked this baby." And now, claiming it's our grandson, our son is missing. And now you want to pin this man on us. You'll never get away with it. Go back to your village. Where did you come from? Michael tried to calm his wife down, but he wasn't in the best condition either. After the news of his son's death, the man wanted to stand up for his daughter-in-law, but it was sluggish. His wife, however, bought the words about the young daughter-in-law. She jumped out into the street and from the high porch of the mansion began to water Kathy with the last words. Since she was with a child in her arms and a bag with modest belongings, she ran away from the house of her husband's parents. But she was met with insults and accusations of sins she had not committed. Betty looked at the landlady. I don't think Kathy will forgive you. I mean, you've basically ruined her whole life. And why did you bring her up today? I know there's no forgiveness. Would you believe that over the years, I've woken up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat because Ethan's voice whispered to me, "Mom, how could you do this to them? They are my son and your grandson." But my pride prevented me from organizing a search for Kathy before. And then yesterday, just before the damn date, someone told me so clearly to find her again. I don't even know my grandson's name. His name is Michael, after his grandfather. The hostess froze with surprise, and her unblinking gaze began to kindle Betty's forehead. "Betty, and how do you know such details?" "Kathy told me by accident, but that was before you kicked her out. I can't make any promises about helping you find her. You see, I can't order my son around, especially now he lives far away from me. And then I'm not sure Kathy herself would want to see you." Adriana said nothing. She turned her chair to the window and sat there all day watching the clouds floating across the sky. Several times Betty peered into the living room, but the hostess remained in the same unchanged position. It wasn't until it began to get dark that the companion ventured closer to the sleeper, her hands clasping a framed photograph. The picture showed Ethan and Kathy smiling happily. People sometimes don't think about why coincidences happen in life. Some people think that someone invisible in heaven is controlling earthly life to make it a little romantic. This unknown mastermind of the universal show lights the stars. People look at these celestial sparks and make different wishes, but very rarely do these dreams become reality. Kathy, too, had once blindly trusted the stars. Even now, when she knew the bitterness of loss and betrayal, she still hoped that these celestial beacons could bring a miracle. On this September evening, she sat opposite the window and waited for the dark sky to come alive with stars. On the desk among a mountain of unchecked notebooks lay an old photo in a simple frame. The woman gently stroked her hand over the glass, on which 2 tears immediately fell. "Hello, Ethan. How are you? I know you're alive, and I'm sure we'll meet again. It's just not time yet, but I am ready to wait even for eternity, because I love only you alone." Kathy gently wiped the glass again, and just as carefully, she put the picture back. She did not even suspect that there in the distant Moscow suburbs, the mother of her missing husband also at this moment clutched to her chest exactly the same photo. Only that photo is on a more expensive frame. The woman ordered herself only not to write. "It's time to get to work. Otherwise, I'll have to check the essays of my Lomonosov." Kathy did not just love her work. She couldn't breathe without school, and the kids didn't bother her. The fact that she had to carry knowledge to children in this respectful provincial town. The rather modest living conditions did not matter to her. It was not by chance that her son often called her manly Spartans. Michael was proud of his mother, and he was not at all shocked that the boys often laughed at him. When Kathy learned about this, she was at first afraid that the guy may form complexes, but he noticed the change in his mother's behavior and tried to calm her down. "Mom is not worried about me. Everything will be fine." Yeah, a lot of guys tell me I'm a mama's boy, but I don't see anything humiliating about it. I mean, we're all living on this planet. We're all mom's kids. Then Kathy realized that her 13-year-old son had grown up. Only an accomplished man could philosophize so freely. Thinking of her son now, Kathy smiled. Where was he missing about the shower? He promised to call more often, but he doesn't keep his promise. And then there's the military. Kathy moved the stack of notebooks closer and opened the first one she found. Let's see what R. Smith wrote about the meaning of life. Every class has its own leader. William Smith's orders never left the agenda of every board meeting, and his mom was a frequent visitor to the vice principal's office. But despite the restless character, the boy was literate, wrote and loved books, which is generally uncharacteristic of modern youth. The essay of the Perturber of Order was laconic in volume, but rich in content. Most of all, Kathy hit the phrase, "The meaning of life is when you choose your own goal and move towards it." Weak people cannot withstand and turn down halfway. And then they scold everyone, but not themselves. That's why I always take an example from those who are ready for any difficulties. from those who never turn off the path, despite some stylistic mistakes. Kathy gave it an A, such a smart boy, but behavior. She read her students' essays, and it felt like she was reading someone else's mind. And it made her feel uncomfortable inside. More than once, the teacher caught herself thinking that children's essays are a very sensitive structure, especially for teenagers. But unfortunately, even very experienced teachers, sometimes unconsciously, hurt unprotected children's souls with their careless attitude. She remembers how during her internship she was outraged by the ugly act of one class lady who read in front of everyone the essay of a girl who wrote about her innermost dreams. Despite the rules of subordination, the then student called the old teacher destructive to children's souls. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind then. You, the older generation, scold the youth without end, while you yourselves commit low deeds. Children have entrusted you with their deepest dreams, and you just publicly humiliated that girl. It's disgusting. The senior colleagues were astonished by the fiery speech. The trainee, but only the math teacher was willing to stand up for her. She's right. You can't treat children like some formless substance. Every child is an individual who needs to be respected. Kathy cried for a long time afterwards, worrying about a student she didn't know who had been shamed by her old teacher in front of the whole class. She vowed that she would never follow such an example. That incident touched her deeply because she herself had been the victim of adult mistakes many times during her school years. Kathy grew up in a family where everything was built on trust. Her mother worked as a cook in a sanatorium and her father was a driver. Besides her, there were 2 other children in the family. So the parents had to work hard to clothe and feed such a crowd. But they never complained about the fate. On the contrary, they were happy to have a big family. Benjamin was very proud of his children and liked to repeat, "My mother and I are doing our best, and we will nurse our grandchildren. We will create a commune. The girls will do the nightmare. The boys will fish and chop wood." The men laughed at him at work. "Your dreams are primitive." Today, normal people dream of prosperity. They want to travel abroad. You're thinking down to earth. Those who are tied to the land are more adapted to life. I'm sure my children will grow up to be decent people. My father was an old school man, so he believed in justice. But other mores were already prevailing in society. The cult of money was seeping into every aspect of life, and even the school with its traditions could not withstand the onslaught of change. Now powerful parents could dictate their own rules. Kathy and her parents had to face such injustice in the last year of school. A youth forum was to be held in the capital, and the school had to send 3 delegates to the event. Kathy was on her way to a gold medal. She was first on the list. Together with her, 2 more of the best students from the 9th grade were to go to Moscow. The girl began to prepare intensively, and with the help of the class teacher wrote a short report on the work that is carried out in the school. But just a few hours before departure, when the team was already assembled, she was summoned to the director. In the office, in addition to the principal and 2 head teachers, there were still strangers. The principal, blushing and paler, said, "Bracker, unfortunately, you are not going to the forum." Kathy's breath caught, but she clenched her fists to keep from crying. "Why, Bracker? Don't take offense, but you can't delegate the same people from our institution all the time. There are other guys. They may not be stars from the sky, as it's fashionable to say nowadays, but they deserve to represent our school too. And that's what our sponsors think." The principal nodded towards a group of men in expensive suits, and as if on cue, they smiled. But Kathy caught something unpleasant in their smiles. Later in her life, she'd encountered those same smiles more than once. But that first time, for a 16-year-old girl, the cancellation of her trip came as a shock. She ran home in tears, leaving her parents in tears. "I'm not going anywhere." The girl cried all evening, tucked into her pillow. When she recounted her visit to the principal's office, Benjamin was outraged. "And I won't let it go. I will not allow my child's soul to be mutilated." Kathy had never seen her father in such a state, but she had not yet fully realized what had happened. The next day, the head of the large family went in search of the truth. He returned from school depressed and immediately asked, "Mother, pour me 100 grams, otherwise I can't vouch for myself." All serious matters. Parents always discussed without the children. But this time, the father called Kathy. The mother tried to show him with signs that he shouldn't do that. Benjamin said, "Our children can't live permanently in the cocoon of our worries. Let them get used to this life at once. Let them know that everything in this world is ruled by connections and money." The principal is basically a kind woman and a true professional. But she has a family too. As I understand it, she was put under a lot of pressure and she gave in. There was desperation and a kind of hopeless resignation in the man's voice. He took another drink, though he'd never allowed himself to do that in front of children before. "You, Kathy, forgive your father. I couldn't stand up for you. Those ghouls in expensive jackets told me directly to know my place and not to make waves. What are you doing with your pig snout, you stupid driver? Yeah, these are the times. Bras run everything now. But nothing, my daughter. There will be a holiday on our street." Kathy was used to trusting her father from childhood. She believed that for him there were no difficulties. But that night she realized that childhood was over. And Daddy was an ordinary man, not a wizard. She couldn't sleep for a long time and looked at mega things from the sky stars. The naive girl that night did not yet know that the most terrible trials were ahead of her. After that incident with the failed trip, Kathy began to categorically refuse any public errands. Stroppy pupil more than once called on the carpet to shame, but she always calmly replied that she simply did not have enough time. "Is there no one else to send but me? I'm not the only one in this school. Especially now I have to prepare hard for the entrance because my parents have no money for tutors." The defiant behavior of the graduate annoyed the teachers, but they could not do anything and soon retreated. According to the plan, after the awarding of diplomas, there were supposed to be large-scale events. Parents spent a whole year collecting money to buy a beautiful dress for their daughter's graduation party. For the celebration, it was decided to rent a banquet hall of the only decent restaurant in the city. When the father voiced the amount to be paid for the farewell to the school, Kathy objected. "Daddy, I don't want to attend this vanity parade. I'll get my diploma, and that's it." The mother tearfully began to persuade her daughter. "Kathy, daughter, think what people will say. They'll count me and my father with bills or beggars. After all, prom night is an unshakable tradition." The girl hugged her mother. "Mom, I used to think so too and dreamed of becoming a prom queen, but now I realize that I don't need it. Much more important for me now is the fact of receiving a diploma and enrollment. And then, I don't want us to spend money on absolutely unnecessary things. You'd better buy a new TV, because the old one works every other day." The friends also discussed Bracker's refusal from graduation for a long time. Some thought that this decision was caused by resentment for the trip that didn't take place. Others called the medals from her uncle's gore business. Of course, the case when she was removed from the list of forum delegates on the last day became a kind of watershed, because it helped the young girl to see the world not through rose-colored glasses, but as it really is. So she said goodbye to the school. Without much regret or remorse, Kathy had long dreamed of becoming a teacher, even though her father had discouraged her. But why would you want to be a teacher? Young people today want to be lawyers or economists. You're pretty good at math. Could you go into this, like his programming? A teacher is an honorable profession, but it's not in favor nowadays. Dad, that's exactly the reason I want to go to teacher training school. You're single-handedly decided to restore the prestige of this profession. Why not? Somebody has to start a renaissance. Perhaps it's the right thing to do. Teachers, like doctors, are the future of the country. That's why I approve of your decision." There was a shortage of teachers that year, so Kathy was welcomed with open arms. The admission committee was even more pleased that the medalist dreams of entering the philological faculty. One lady enthusiastically remarked how nice it is that there are those among today's youth who are interested in the great heritage of our language. Perhaps in the foreseeable future, we will be able to regain the title of the most reading country. Kathy was not distracted by entertainment and idle conversations with fellow students. She was fully immersed in her studies, but her friends still managed to persuade her once to take part in an unusual event. "Kathy, but be a friend and help me out. You see, it's not just dancing, lessons, it's a serious event. The organizers want to do something like a 19th century New Year's Eve ball." Imagine the fantasy. Although the girl was already intrigued, noticed it well. But the format of the ball implies a certain dress code. What are we going to wear? Not in jeans. "Kathy, we're all set. We're getting costumes from the movie studio. The event will be televised, so it's in everyone's interest to make sure it goes off without a hitch. Imagine the dresses. Kathy, it's going to be quite an extravaganza, and you have to be a part of it." But not Kathy, not her friends. Couldn't even in their wildest dreams imagine what the costume designer of the country's premier movie studio was really like. They were led through a labyrinth of corridors for a long time, until finally they found themselves in front of a door with a sign "Women's Costumes, 19th Century." Behind this door opened a center that every girl dreamed of in her heart. Such beauty and luxury in one place Kathy had never seen. A few hours of premiering and fitting outfits, and the young ladies were ready to conquer hearts. One of the girls said, "Now we can go dancing." Kathy was surprised. "But you didn't warn me that I had to learn more dances. This is a surprise. You're covered head to toe in dust. It's time to shake it off. And it's not just any ball. There will be cavaliers in uniforms and cavaliers. These are cadets from the military school. And we'll have to learn a classical ballroom dance to keep up appearances." The first master class was held within the walls of the military school. The choreographer immediately got down to business. He loudly commanded the young men, "We have time to spare, so we will work fruitfully. Now we'll pick up the ladies' dates. Then we'll learn a few basic elements. Since there's not much time for dance lessons, we'll limit ourselves to the bare minimum." It took the dance teacher no more than 5 minutes to get the two crowds of students into line. Carrie's partner was a tall, blonde man. The young man immediately suggested, "Let's get acquainted, so it will be easier for us." Ethan, Kathy. But the young people did not have time to shake hands because the dance teacher suddenly shouted right above their heads, "Talking in formation, do not get distracted. Get movement and consistency. The whole country will be looking at you. I have no intention of embarrassing myself in front of 1 million of our fellow citizens. Almost 3 days with little breaks for sleep and food." The students of 2 schools learned the waltz and the cheerful thunderclap. By evening, their feet were aching badly. Kathy, laughing, shared her experiences with Ethan. "I feel like I've run a marathon." Indeed, our preparations for the New Year's Eve ball are like a dance marathon, but I don't regret running it. Why, Ethan looked around and then whispered quietly, "Because you and I have met. I already feel like you're not a fragile, painful dance partner, but a real battle buddy." Carrie, it was interesting with Ethan. The young man shone with erudition and witty jokes, and they had no shortage of topics for conversation. After 3 days of acquaintance, Kathy had the feeling that she had known this smiling fellow for a long time. When she told him that, he laughed. "I have similar feelings. It is possible, Kathy, that we have met in a past life, so the present one should not be separated." Kathy didn't mind this suggestion because she was magnetically attracted to Ethan. A few months later, they couldn't live without each other. The 5-minute officer didn't get wise, but simply suggested it one day. "Kathy, how would you like to be my wife?" The girl also did not play the princess and immediately answered, "I look at it positively." Ethan smiled. He loved Kathy because she didn't have that nasty Mansky quality that most girls had. "If that's the case, then let's bring this news down on the heads of our ancestors. Just tell me, who are we going to surprise first, yours or mine?" Ethan pretended to think agonizingly. Then he got excited and shouted, "We'll flip a coin. If it comes up tails, we go to yours, and the heads will be mine." The lot chose the groom's parents, and the couple didn't hesitate to visit. Adriana pretended to be so virtuous. She glowed and raved, trying to please her guest. "Son, why didn't you tell me you weren't coming alone, but with a girlfriend?" "It's not a girlfriend, Mom and Dad. Please love and welcome my future wife, Kathy. We filed the application today." Ethan's parents were now the two of them wailing their hearts out, and Michael even disappeared for a moment to pay for his ceremonial tunic. For such an occasion, I must be in full readiness. When Kathy saw the general's epaulets, she felt dizzy. She jerked sharply at Ethan's arm and whispered, "This isn't fair. Why didn't you warn me that your father was a general?" The young man, she also whispered back, "Well, first of all, generals are simple people like you and me. And secondly, my father is already retired, but he always keeps a good attitude because he wants to be an example for me. Ethan, you have great parents." The evening passed quickly, and Kathy never once felt awkward or tense. Adriana very tactfully asked the girl about her family and her studies. She was pleasantly surprised to learn that Kathy had graduated with a gold medal and would be receiving her diploma in just a month. Such coincidences happened. Ethan, too, would soon be on his way to his duty station. Michael looked pleased and emphasized that Adriana was not going alone, but with his wife. And for a young officer, the main thing is to strengthen the rear at once. I at one time missed this point, for which I received the nickname Evil Polkin. Then I was in the rank of colonel, but I did not have a wife, so I'm with this case late, counting for 2 decades years. But better late than never. Yes, I felt sorry for you, and even allowed myself to wag my finger at the general. And you'd be completely lost, my general, if it weren't for me. Kathy, you don't realize what children they are. I mean men. And even a general's epaulets don't make them serious. After all, my Michael was a street kid until he was 40. That's why I had so much to put up with him. I gave up the stage for him. I could have had a stupendous career. Adriana rolled her sweaty eyes prettily, and the general laughed heartily. My wife tells everyone that story. The reality was a little different. Her theater went bankrupt, and there was no prospect of getting a job in another. And then I came along. The girl agreed to be my wife. What struck Kathy most of all was how different Ethan's parents were. How do you get along with them? I'm sometimes surprised myself. Mom can be like that sometimes. How can I put it softer? Arrogant, or something. She often boasts about her position and isn't even embarrassed about it. You can't tell from her. Although first impressions aren't always the right ones. But your mom fascinates me. I think she feels the same way about you. To be honest, I'm surprised. I wonder why. I'll tell you, don't get jealous of me. I won't. So what's the intrigue? Mom's been looking for a bride for me for the last few months. The list included 2 daughters of her friends and even some of my father's former coworkers. Didn't you find someone worthy of the job? No, there wasn't, because I met you before I met you. And to tell you the truth, I didn't expect my mother to welcome you so warmly. My mom's a bit of a weirdo, but she really struck a chord with me today. But Ethan didn't know his mother well. When he got home, she was waiting for him in the living room. "Mom, are you awake? What's got you so excited? How can I sleep well when my only son is getting married? You don't like my choice. I will not curve my soul, not satisfied with Kathy, of course, smart and very nice girl, but she has no breed." The young man was indignant. "Mom, will you at least out of respect for me to pick up expressions? People are not cats or dogs to choose them by pedigree. Yes, my fiancé's parents are ordinary people, but that fact is of absolutely no consequence to me. You should. An officer shouldn't have a wife from the wiretaps. The only consolation is that your Kathy's well-educated. She's a teacher, after all. Otherwise, my father and I wouldn't approve of this marriage. Don't speak for me." Michael went noisily into the living room in his pajamas. "Why are you arguing in the middle of the night? Don't you have enough to talk about in the middle of the day? I'm ordering everyone to bed. Stand down." The man poured from the water and drank a whole glass. The fish didn't jump today. She must have fallen in love. If you are interested in my opinion, I am in favor of each person deciding his own life issues. Our son's old enough to be an officer, and you shouldn't impose your opinion on him, let alone choose a wife for him. Though Adriana skillfully guided her general. But there were times when she knew it was better to remain silent. This was just such a moment. Michael turned off the lights in the living room, signaling that he would not tolerate a mess in the house. My general's on a rampage. It's time for you and me to go to the barracks, son. Sergeyevich could chomp on the cheek and went to his room. A month later, the whole Daksha village was celebrating a wedding. It was summer, so the celebration was held outdoors. Kathy's mother along with Betty and the others. It was the Syrians who prepared so many treats that the table was bursting with abundance. To Ethan's surprise, Adriana too decided to join in the common cause. She put on her apron coquettishly and got busy preparing a dessert of fresh berries. She liked the process so much that she repeated it without end. She didn't even realize that cooking was such a fascinating activity. Betty supported her hostess. You'll enjoy it even more when the guests will start to take away the delicious food you've prepared. We are sure they will praise you, because indeed the dessert turned out tender and very tasty. Thank you, Betty. Now, after my son's wedding, I'll have a new hobby. But those plans were not to be. For a whole month, the newlyweds were studied because they were both taking their last credits and exams. Everyone was waiting where Ethan would be sent for further service. Kathy even packed her things little by little, but a month passed by, followed by a second one. And there was no change. There was one positive change, though. Kathy was getting ready to become a mom. This news did not make her mother-in-law happy for some reason. Adriana looked at her daughter-in-law, and through her teeth she said, strangely enough, no sooner had she cried out bitterly, and she was already in the physician. Kathy tried not to dwell on the mood of her mother-in-law, who increasingly looked at her with icy eyes. Only once did she ask Ethan, your mother's not happy all the time. Should we get an apartment so we don't embarrass them? Kathy, don't be silly. In your situation, you need support, and your parents are far away. Wait a minute. What are you preparing me for? Aren't we going to your duty station together? The man realized he blurted it out and tried to remedy the situation. Kathy, I'm a military man and must be ready for any turn of events. In a word, wherever I am ordered, I will go to serve. But for now, the matter remains open. 2 days later, Ethan came home excited. We leave at 200 hours, so we must hurry up with the packing. For God's sake, don't put anything extra or they'll throw it out at the inspection. Kathy froze in a daze, a bad feeling creeping up on her spine. Ethan, what about me? Ethan was hurriedly putting the necessary things into his backpack. He hugged his young wife tenderly. What are you all about? Everything will be fine. We'll be part of the peacekeeping force, so there's no need to worry. Adriana was no less worried than her daughter-in-law. Son, at least tell me where Mom will be. You're a general's wife, and you know very well that such questions can't be asked to the military. Yes, I know. I'm sorry, but I completely forgot about your father's status. Because right now, like hundreds of other mothers, I'm worried about my son. In just half an hour, the women had the young officer packed for the road. Ethan was in a great hurry and refused to eat lunch. He did not allow the women to see him off. For the rest of her life, Kathy remembered Ethan's smiling face and his farewell. Everything will be all right with us. I'll be back. The black limousine blinked its taillights arrogantly and quickly disappeared around the corner leading to the federal highway. Betty thoughtfully asked why a young officer who had graduated yesterday was being driven around in a limousine. It was the first time I'd ever seen such a thing. Du proudly shook Kudryashov on his head. Betty, you don't understand anything about military service. Don't forget that Ethan is a general's son. As far as I know, pedigree doesn't matter in the army. That was the case yesterday. But that's all changed today. Haven't they, Kathy? But the young woman was still staring into the darkness where the black car had disappeared. He'll come back. He promised me. Betty stirred. Adriana, I don't think your sister-in-law is all right. It's probably from worry. It's not good for her to be in such a state. God forbid it affects the child. I think it was kind of the governor to take the girl inside. Come along, my dear. You mustn't be nervous. My mother-in-law was about to join me, but then she changed her mind. She couldn't understand whether she was more concerned about her son or her daughter-in-law. Of course, Kathy herself was not the object of her attention, but she carried their grandson under her heart. On the veranda, where she was giving her spouse a cheerful meditation, Michael was there. Ethan was there. You should at least come out to see your son off. I don't like long send-offs, so I didn't show up on purpose. It's very hard for Ethan now. The first time and then this. What is it, Michael? Tell me what it's about. Don't torture me. You know everything. Don't yell. I know as much as you do. Don't forget, I've been retired a long time. It's just a hunch. But there's no other option. How about we just wait? Unexpected joy whispered fervently to Michael. I'm willing to wait months and years for my son to be okay. But Kathy, will we have her all this time? I don't get it. Is it too much of a burden for you to have your son's wife around? We just have to take care of her. In Michael's voice, there was a note that always frightened Christina, so she was silent. But in her head, under the lovely curls of her glasses, were not good thoughts. I'm not at all happy with this girl's campaign. Let her go to her relatives. There's no reason for her to give up here. The next day in the morning, while everyone in the house was asleep, dialed the number of parents of the daughter-in-law. The girl's father answered the phone. The wily mother-in-law made her voice more tragic and tearful. Benjamin, sweet Ethan is on a business trip. That's the thing. He's not going anywhere. Kathy, the poor thing is suffering. Don't take this the wrong way, but Michael and I thought it would be best in her situation to be surrounded by family. Yes, she spoke very convincingly. The girl's father listened to her carefully and promised, You should have called us earlier. By the weekend, we'll definitely be on the verge. Oh, Benjamin, it must be inconvenient for you to take the bus. Why don't we send a car or order a cab for you? You've forgotten that we have our own transportation. It's not a foreign car, but it runs well. Yes, she put the receiver down on the machine and thought about the intricacies of fate for a long time. But after talking to the saint, she calmed down. She'll go to her parents. She'll be much better off there. Who knows? Maybe she'll stay in her miserable little town. But she's no match at all. Our Ethan. In most fairy tales, the heroes get their happily ever after. In Carrie's case, fate was generous to Carrie only in the form of misfortune, since the girl's happiness was short-lived. Evil fate decided to fill her life with troubles and hardships, but Kathy did not yet know what trials awaited her. It was only a few days after Ethan's departure, and the future mother-to-be got a little used to the idea that she would have to live temporarily while waiting for her husband. On Saturday morning, there was first a quiet knock on her room. Then her mother-in-law tiptoed in. How are you feeling, honey? Thank you, Adriana. I'm fine. I slept soundly tonight. That's great. And I came to tell you Kathy jumped up in bed. Ethan's back. You should be embarrassed. No, really. He just went on a business trip. It's at least 6 months. So we have to be patient. That's not what I meant. Your parents are supposed to be here today. We've made arrangements with them. This news really pleased Kathy. In a burst of emotion, she was even embarrassed. Her mother-in-law in her arms and kissed her. Thank you. I really missed them so much, and the house too. The mood was high. She marveled at her resourcefulness and mentally repeated what a good girl she was. Bracker would take her daughter and let her stay there until the birth, and maybe even longer. But time passed, and the guests did not appear. Kathy dialed long distance several times, but the answer was a long dial tone. So she called her older sister. Alina, do you know where Mom and Dad are? We're waiting for them to visit. And her sister shouted into the phone. Don't you know yet? Kathy, Mom, and Dad. The tube fell out of the girl's hands. At that moment, a worried Betty appeared on the doorstep. "Hurry up and turn on the TV. It's terrible." Kathy recognized her father's car immediately, but the TV footage of the scary crash was pretty. Betty once resembled a pile of regimented metal. Kathy screamed, "Mommy, Daddy," and barely had time to pick up the body of the unconscious young woman. Probably should call an ambulance. In her condition, it's dangerous. After the terrible tragedy that had robbed her of both her father and mother at once, Kathy lived like a dream. She automatically performed the proper actions, but she did it indifferently. It was as if her emotions had died in her. For 2 months, she didn't go out at all, and Betty was very disturbed by her condition. She decided to talk to Adriana about her daughter-in-law's future. "Yes, I'm sorry, but I get the impression that you don't care about Kathy. You know, Betty, you're right. I just don't understand why you care so much about my sister-in-law. Maybe you have your reasons. I don't know what you're implying. I'm just saying. Oh, by the way, I was wondering if your Constantine knows Kathy. If I'm not mistaken, your son is in internal affairs in the capital, and they may have met there." "That's a strange question you're asking. Unlike some people, I'm not in the habit of prying into my adult son's affairs." Adriana shook her lips, but said nothing. Another month and a half passed, and a new grief fell on the young woman's shoulders. On a Sunday afternoon, men in civilian clothes showed up, but it was not hard to tell from their posture that they were military. One man looked over the quite superior figure of his mind forward, belly forward, and invited Christina. "We need to talk to you." The woman already knew what this stern-looking man would say. She clasped her hands together in a lock so that her fingers beat. Did the man take his eyes away from her? No. More precisely, it is not yet known for sure. He's missing. There were 4 other men on patrol with him, 2 dead, 1 in intensive care, but critical condition. The survivors said they were attacked, ambushed. They're working on different versions, but nothing yet. We have to wait. Yeah, we have to wait. Adriana stared at some point in front of her, stunned like that. She had been caught by her sister-in-law after the men in black suits had left their manor. Kathy had never seen her mother-in-law like that. "Adriana, what's wrong? Don't be silent, please. Ethan, my Ethan is gone." The women sobbed and hugged each other. Then Betty joined them. And during the night, Kathy went into labor. The labor was not due for another month, so everyone was worried about the health of the baby. Betty was eager to share her knowledge. Month-to-month families survive better than month-to-month families. Boys are especially vulnerable. But God willing, they'll be fine. Nadeau kept quiet. She only called the maternity hospital once, and after that she walked around for a week as if she had water in her mouth. Betty decided to take the initiative. "Aren't you going to go and see Kathy? She probably needs to get her discharge stuff. And the baby too. And if you can't wait, you can go, but I'm not going." On the 5th day, Kathy and the baby were discharged to the happy mother. Her mother-in-law wouldn't let her in the house. Adriana's eyes burned with hatred. "This baby is not my son. I don't know, and I don't want to know who you took him out with. And now you want to force it on us." Kathy cradled the infant to his chest. She couldn't believe her ears. "Yeah, what are you talking about?" She's still asking. "I thought it was weird that you got pregnant so fast." "You're the one on the side. She was out with someone else. She's using my son as a cover. Otherwise, how do you explain that an 8-month-old baby was born weighing 3,800, almost 4 kilograms? Isn't that a lot for a premature baby? And your suspicions are unfounded. Look at your grandson. He looks just like Ethan." Kathy held out a cool blue envelope to her mother-in-law, but she roughly pushed it away. "Don't try to push pity." And never admitted to be Strelchenko and go to the place where she walked. Let them feed you there and sing Betty, pack her things. And in 5 minutes, neither she nor her freak will be here. Kathy, hoping to find support. She looked at Michael, who was silently watching the scene. But Michael looked away. This sign spoke eloquently that he fully supported his wife. Betty took out 2 suitcases with Kathy's things and whispered quietly, "I'll walk you out." Feeding time was approaching, and the baby began to scream loudly. A threatened, "Kathy's not the ones, not the rubbers. This isn't a homeless shelter. Otherwise, I can call the police. You don't have a residency here. I'll tell them you're begging." Betty almost forced the girl off the estate. "Kathy, let's spend the night. I'll put you up with my sister. She lives nearby. And then we'll figure something out." Relatives home. The ruler turned out to be a surprisingly kind and charming woman. Betty briefly noticed Stacia is a nurse, so the baby is in good hands. The women tended to the newborn, and Kathy could not get rid of the image of her mother-in-law that haunted her. She saw the angry face of Ethan's mother and heard those hurtful words again. "Go back to where you were made that child." The worries of the past few months had completely drained the young woman. She didn't notice how she had blacked out. She was brought out of her daze by Betty's voice. "Kathy, what are you going to name the boy? Are you men?" A smile appeared on the young woman's pale face. In Christina, Ethan said if there is to be a son, name him after his grandfather. That's right, let him carry on the Jackson family line. What a little fellow, eh? He's a real big boy. Kathy went to the small sofa, whereon a white terry towel crushed the strong body of the newborn son. The baby was merrily blowing bubbles and actively moving his arms and legs. The young mom smiled through her tears. "My son, Kuroshka, you are the best baby in the world." The boy answered her in his own language. It was the first dialogue between mother and son, but it was the one that made Kathy move on. For almost a month, Kathy and her newborn son were in the care of her sisters. The young mom was gradually coming back to life, although the future seemed a blurred circulation. "Betty, thank you so much, but I can't stay dependent on you forever." "What are you thinking, Kathy? What are you gonna do with a baby in your arms now?" "I'm gonna look for a job. You'll have plenty of time to work. Let Michael grow up. You're not shy at all. And my Sam thinks my aunt and I are doing the right thing. Remember, girl, there are more good people in the world than evil." This was truly confirmed when Kathy secretly started looking for a job with Betty. Surprisingly, she quickly found an offer that suited her perfectly. A school in a provincial town outside the Urals. It required a teacher of Russian and literature. Without putting things off in a long box, she called and heard joyful, "Come. We have a critical situation, but I have an infant. Do not worry. We will provide you with housing and babysitting. It's true that the salary is very modest, but it's enough for the first time. And we'll help you. We have very kind and helpful people." Betty and her sisters saw Kathy off like family. "Where are you going in such a hurry? You should stay a little longer." We've gotten so used to Kathy. There were lots of tears and words of encouragement. And when Kathy jumped on the train, Betty asked, "Isn't there anything you want to give to your relatives?" "You know who I mean." "I do know. I've cut them out of my life forever, and I hope I never have to see them again." As the train disappeared into the distance, Betty told her sister that Adriana could expect anything. "But Michael surprised me. He could have stood up for the poor girl. But God judged them. And Michael is like his grandfather, but he didn't need his grandson. It's been over 20 years. And then I started talking about Kathy. I hadn't thought of her in years. And to be honest, Betty didn't know what to do. Sure, Sam wouldn't turn her down as she asked. But would Kathy need to? She's probably been married for a long time. It's entirely possible that she's calling someone else daddy too. And here comes Queen Adriana. How will she behave? What will she say? Betty was at a complete loss. She decided she'd wait a little longer. God willing, the old woman would change her mind. Kathy closed the magazine tiredly. What a day. Nearly half the class had started to sniffle and sneeze by the last class period. She'd heard there was a flu going around town, but she didn't believe it was that bad. And she didn't believe it when they said it was 200 hours. And here she was, right in front of her eyes. We had to call the parents to take Shmeika's group to the medic. Half of the brought worse temperature was, and at the door no office is already a line of children and other classes. The directors just grabbed their heads. And another day like this, and we have to close for quarantine. In general, I got home with only one desire: to lie down and at least half an hour not to move. I've got a really nasty headache. Well, I don't want to collapse. Either the words were prophetic, or the disease is too strong. But tonight Kathy called the principal and told her in your voice that she had a fever. Oh, Kathy, what do we do? I realize you didn't do it on purpose. Only you're the third teacher who called me, corrects me, and as soon as she's better and goes to work. Kathy just threw herself on the pillow. How did the phone ring? Mommy, hi. Oh, it's so good to hear from you. Mommy, what's wrong with your voice? Oh, don't mind me. I'm fine. I'm just a little sick. Oh, wow. She's fine. Mommy, I'm Mommy. We'll be here tonight. Oh, Michael, Mom, you don't need anything. I'm just passing through literally 3 o'clock between planes. I got a chill in my soul. Where are you going, son? Mom, please don't worry. It's okay. But how not to worry? Her heart wanted to jump out of her chest, no matter how bad it felt. She got up and began to billet, and for her son to eat fresh, and to take with her. Ate a couple of pills, seemed to feel a little better. She should get it all done. At 200, the doorbell rang. Michael stood on the doorstep. She rushed over to him, hugged his face, turned away. God forbid Michael get sick, and only then she saw that he wasn't alone. Behind Michael was a girl, small, skinny, really thin, braid like that. That Kathy's arm would be thinner. Mommy, I'd like you to meet her. This is my wife. Kathy almost fell over. Like a wife. Michael laughed. Mom, you look like we kept the wedding from you. We didn't. We were going to do it the way it's supposed to be done. And I got a ride from us last night before we flew out here. Jesus. Kathy hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Being a military wife is even harder than being a bride. Welcome to the family. The girl blushed and suddenly cried. Kathy looked fearfully at her son. Michael hugged his wife. Mom, she was just very worried about how you would accept her. I want her to stay here with you. She's finished her studies. She has no family. Kathy immediately remembered herself. She remembered again how she'd just been chased away from home in shame. No matter how hard she tried, she never forgot. And after all these years, she was just as hurt as before. She hugged the girl. Clara, no one will hurt you here. Come on in. I have so much to cook. I still have time to put all Vanya's things together. Mom, why? Michael looked at her in surprise. You're sick. You've been cooking all night. Kathy looked at him so much that he was immediately embarrassed. Thank you. You know how I like to eat. They settled down in the kitchen. Clara ate a little and started to peck her nose. Then she nestled on Michael's shoulder and dozed off. Mom, tell me, do you know where Dad was sent? No, son, I don't know 100%. But you're a military man. You should know there was only one hot spot back then. Kathy, frozen. What are you, Mom? What are you? These are completely different times, and I'm going to sort of maintain order. It'll be fine. I'm definitely not leaving you guys. You know, son, when Dad left, he said I'd be back for sure. He never lied to me. And I don't feel like he's gone. He's definitely out there somewhere. And I'm sure of that. Just like I'm sure that something terrible probably happened to him, and he can't come. Otherwise, he'd be here. Mom, it's been years. Let's say your gut is right, and he's alive, you know. So he has another family. Well, a man can't go that long without coming back. If he wants to come back. Michael, you just don't know Dad. You don't know how much we loved each other. Kathy suddenly smiled. I didn't get married, even though I could have. She didn't look at her mother for a while. Then shifted her gaze to Clara. I really hope that our love is no less than yours and your father's. They are. They're in charge. I have to go. I wouldn't want you to come with me to the airport. Kathy jumped up like a couple. You just got here. 3 o'clock passed us. They watched as the door closed behind you. In another situation, Kathy would have cried a tear, but now, tucked into her shoulder, she was crying. Clara. Michael. No. So Kathy is responsible for this girl. Come on, Clara. You can't worry so much. You're fine. Clara took her face away from her robe. He'll be back. Everything will be all right after all. Kathy nodded assuredly. Of course. You heard him promise. And my son has kept his word since childhood. She smiled. Once the girl had settled in a bit. A couple of days later at dinner, Kathy began to ask her where she was from and everything. I was born in a small town 100 kilometers from Moscow. My mom worked as a librarian, and my dad drove people around the villages by bus. We were never particularly rich, but we lived well. And then my dad met another woman. I was 13 then. He left us. You can't imagine how scary it is when a person you love, who you trust blindly, betrays you like that, just pushes you away and leaves. It's scary. He never came home again. Mom broke down. She started drinking. There was nothing I could do. When I was 17, her heart just gave out. My dad didn't even come to the funeral. The man was my family man. He knew how scared and hurt I was. And he didn't come. Neighbors helped. My mom's distant relative, her friend. 3 days later, my dad was killed in a car accident. I couldn't not go. I went to the cemetery. A woman rushed up to me. It was his wife. She was crying and screaming that it was my mom's and my fault. That if he hadn't been thinking about us all the time, he wouldn't have gotten drunk after my mom's funeral, which, as it turned out, she hadn't let him attend, wouldn't have gotten drunk, and wouldn't have gotten behind the wheel. That's how in 1 week I was without parents. God, that poor girl. Yeah, it's all right now. I went to school. I'm a nurse now. Which is good, because I've decided if they go anywhere else, I'm going with him. And it doesn't matter if it's a hot spot or not. I'll be useful anywhere, and he won't change my mind. Kathy smiled. She realized at once that such a conversation between the young couple had already taken place. Otherwise, she would not have heard such intonations in her voice, as if she were proving something to Michael. But she had no time to answer. The doorbell rang. Clara was frightened, and Kathy went to open the door. On the doorstep was an embarrassed William Smith. And William, come in. He entered the apartment. Hello, Kathy. I'm from the whole class. So, how's your health? He handed her a cake. Kathy almost cried. What is this? The children were collecting money to buy her a cake. William, come and have tea. The boy looked at her fearfully. It's one thing to be a messenger to hand over a cake, but it's quite another to have tea at the teacher's house. I'm it. No, you come. Sir, we have guests. The hallway came out. Hello, young man. Come in, please. While Kathy was cutting the cake, making tea, William and Clara were in the room when she came in. They were standing in front of a picture of Ethan and Kathy. Slaga turned around. That's Michael's father. Yes, that's my husband. William turned to her confusedly. The school said you didn't have a husband. He immediately slapped his lips. Kathy. She smiled sadly. As you can see, I do. Only he disappeared in the service 25 years ago. William blew the whistle even, and still no news of him. The boy was impressed, and Kathy hurried to say tea is ready. Please, everyone, to the table. As William walked to the table, his eye came across a more modern photograph. There was Michael in his military uniform. He froze, staring at the photo for a long time. Then he turned back to the table. Oh, my goodness. That's your son. You two look exactly alike. You look exactly alike. At first I thought it was just a processed photo, but I see the shape is different. William said goodbye quickly, wished him a speedy recovery, and ran away. Sarah smiled. It must be nice to be treated like that by students. Of course it is. I didn't expect it myself. Kathy, can you tell me where to go for a job? Am I good to see you off tomorrow? I have to go to the clinic to close my sick leave anyway. Michael hung up. He only got to call home once every 2 weeks, and not because it was too dangerous here. It's just that the only good communication in these parts was by wire. And to get to these very wires, you have to spend 12 o'clock. He was still smiling inwardly, and Liam, with whom they had become very good friends, clapped him on the shoulder. I see you're thinking about home. Liam, you know, I like the service, but it's very depressing without my family. I got married on the eve of my deployment. You can see how I'm drawn to my wife. Liam gloomed at Michael, asked what's wrong with you. I said something wrong. I don't even know. You see, I have my own ideas about family. I got married 3 months before my first trip here. And when I came back after a slight wound, and even at the wrong time, I found my young wife. In the bathhouse, he went dark. Are you implying something? Liam looked at him in surprise. Crazy. I'm just telling you. I'm burned out. That's why I'm sitting here. No one's waiting at home. Michael exhaled. Sorry, bro. It's okay, whatever. For a while they walked in silence through the town, which looked more like a desert village. Then Michael suddenly smiled. You know what, Liam? Let's go to my place after the service is over. We're in the Urals. To the Urals. My sister says she has so many beautiful unmarried nurses. We'll definitely find you that one unique one. I need her. They said it with conviction. Of course you do. How old are you now? 30, 29. But 30's not far off, which means that time will go even faster before you know it. And you'll be 40. And then you'll be on a well-deserved vacation. But no family, no kids, and no one is waiting for you. Liam grinned. You tell beautiful stories. Yes, I can do that. The friends laughed. Come on, think fast, or the ambulances will go home. In the evening, the chief called them to his office. All right, boys, he pulled out a map. Here's the deal. Today our workers went to this village to bring water, to see what needs to be done there. A big family lives there. I don't know how many people, but a lot of them are not very friendly. How did they know the road was going to pass them, though? They seemed to relax a little bit. Anyway, the workers said they saw a man there. Such sharks can't be bothered with the new government. And a lot of people have people like that who are considered slaves. Well, maybe not in the literal sense of the word. That is, they are not whipped or branded. Although I wouldn't be surprised at anything in this country. So this man is obviously Russian, because he understood perfectly well what our guys were saying. And he looks like a Russian, even though his beard is almost knee-high. We should go and check it out. You know, a lot of our people disappeared here back then. People are still out there. Michael said, I know. My father disappeared here. Liam looked at him in surprise. You never said anything about it. Yeah, I haven't had occasion to. Anyway, my colleagues, go tomorrow. Take some guys. Just in case. They left early in the morning. It was a decent ride, hot, sandy. They took 5 men with them, and a couple of laborers who would pretend to measure something. Michael didn't sleep well that night. Didn't know why, but he got very agitated. After the evening's conversation, arrived the oldest, estimating how many of them cordially offered tea. And we will not refuse, while people are working with pleasure to sit in the days. Only now the owner considered that from the car unloaded, and the workers immediately relaxed in the bath. He grinned to himself. The cat smells whose meat it has eaten. They entered a spacious courtyard, sat down on carpets under a large awning. The master only snapped his fingers, and 2 very beautiful, swarthy girls immediately appeared and began to set the table. Liam could not take his eyes off one of them. The host noticed this and frowned. Michael shoved Liam. He seemed to wake up. They began to talk leisurely about the road, about the nature of the cat. When, as it seemed, all topics were exhausted, the one for whom, in fact, they had come appeared. The man was about 50. But that's just a rough guess. He was definitely not a local. The employee asked you cautiously. Yeah, the owner waved his hand. I bought him back about 20 years ago. They wanted to kill him. Well, I felt sorry for him, and I could never use a hand. We took him out, nursed him back to health. He was in such bad shape. And then when peace came, they wanted to let him go because we were animals. But we didn't know where to go. He doesn't remember anything at all. We took pity and kept him. The man dragged a huge tub of waste into the stable. Michael even thought he wouldn't have been able to lift such a vat the first time. And apparently, he's been taking full advantage of it around here. Now, maybe we should show him to the doctors. Remember something. Who needs him now? It's been years. The landlord didn't like the conversation, but Michael decided not to back down. We can talk to him. The landlord wasn't happy, but talk to him. Just keep in mind, I paid money for him. Liam grinned, and he hasn't worked it off yet. The landlord was silent, but Wo didn't go to the man. The man immediately looked at the landlord, but he had to nod. He didn't really want to argue in such a situation. Hello. Hello. The man smiled into his beard. It's so rare to hear my native tongue. They sat down with you. You don't remember anything. No one. You're from nowhere. There's nothing. If I remembered, I'd be sitting here. Why didn't you get help? Well, by the time you get to any point, you'll be enslaved 7 times over. You're the ones who had a successful war. And here, no order has changed. How can that be? Let us help you. Is it worth it now? He's not a bad host. I'll come and what? What do I do? Where do I go? I don't even remember the town I lived in. And my wife or girlfriend, of course, is long since married. My parents, if there were any, are probably dead by now. So there's no point in me doing anything. Do you remember having a girlfriend? No, I don't. I still have the picture. Well, part of it. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I'll wrap it up. I must have gotten hurt. Part of the photo got ruined, but the girl stayed. Here. Michael turned pale. The man held out the photograph to him. It was really hard to see only the girl. A hole shone in the place of the man's head. But Vani couldn't help but recognize her. Exactly the same, only bigger, always stood at his mother's desk. What's the matter with you, boy? He stood up. Are you coming with us? The man looked at him fearfully, then at the master. Standing next to the master were already his 3 sons. Michael raised his gun. Liam stood between him and the family. Easy, easy. Listen, sir, if you believe me, and I can be trusted, I'll send you money for this man tomorrow. Or, if you prefer, something else. I think we can work something out. Liam came closer to the master, and they had a heated discussion. 5 minutes later, he returned. Let's go before he changes his mind. They walked quickly to the car. They tried not to turn their backs. As soon as the village disappeared in the distance, Liam turned sharply to Michael. What the hell? What the hell was that? Do you realize how it could have ended? You're not a boy, but you're acting like one. Why couldn't you inform the authorities and make everything official? Abruptly turned to the rescued and frightened man. Please give me the photograph you showed me. The man uncomplainingly held out the envelope. Michael placed the photo in the palm of his hand. You see? Well, I see it. So what? That this photo is the same one that has always been on my mom's desk all my life. Liam looked at the photo again, then at the man and whistled. So is that how you found your father, by accident or what? The man suddenly closed his eyes and so. Liam. Oh man, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. They stopped the car, but they couldn't bring Ethan back. So he yelled to the driver to drive straight to the hospital. An hour later, a doctor came out to see them. Well, brothers, would you know how much this man has been through? There's no room for him. And you know what's the strangest thing? Not all wounds, or rather, scars, have the same statute of limitations. You'll have to heal, of course, but I'd like to talk about memory. In general, with all the equipment we have, we checked his scalp on the head. All the wounds are superficial. I mean, they could have caused memory loss, sure, but it's 1 in 100. It's something else. Most likely, at some point in time, he was in so much pain, so severe, that he blacked out. But not everything is back to work. In such cases, can hypnosis, unconventional treatment, or a strong shock help? As you realize, all of these things need to be double-checked before we can talk about any treatment. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I can pick him up. Yeah, sure. How are you doing with the paperwork? Michael sat in front of the phone for a long time, unable to figure out how to tell his mother. Liam was sitting next to him. Look, maybe I shouldn't tell you, but when you get there, it'll all make sense. Who knows, Liam, what's best? Right now, I don't understand anything myself. Did you talk to him? Yeah. He doesn't remember anything. But at least he looks human now. He shaved off his beard. Liam, what have you decided? I don't know. You've got so much on your plate. Don't make it up. It'll make me feel better. I honestly don't know how to act yet. I've spent my whole life trying to find my father. Once I found him, I was just so confused. My father's mother is my grandmother. Liam raised his eyebrows in surprise. You never said anything about that. What's there to talk about? She kicked my mother out. When she came home from the hospital, she said I was on a bender. No shit. Dad was missing by then. And anyway, the general's wife is living somewhere. But to be honest, there's a lot of summer for everyone. So maybe there's no one left. So, who are all the military men like? Well, my grandfather. I was named after him. All right, time to get ready. And Doe was looking at Cindy unhappily. But how much longer do we have? Another 40 minutes. I told you we'd be here early. God, couldn't you have picked a train so you could change trains right away? The girl smiled calmly. If I could have, I would have. Betty stroked her granddaughter's hand, as if to reassure her, but the girl calmly said, Grandma, it's okay. I knew what I was walking out on. Cindy was Sam's daughter and Betty's granddaughter. Nadeau still insisted that Betty ask her son for help. He didn't refuse, of course, but the granddaughter absolutely refused to let them go alone. I'm coming with you, and that's out of the question. That's the last thing we need. Traveling alone at that age. But you have to study. Girl, it's okay. It's not like you need to get away before the session. Now, Cindy watched Adriana's caprices and didn't really understand why a woman in such a mood would go to apologize. But the closer they drove to the place, the quieter Adriana became. She almost stopped talking, swearing, staring out the window and thinking about something. Betty even began to worry about her. Then she couldn't bear to ask. And the daughter was quite ticked off. Maybe. You don't need anything. Betty don't just need to think. To remember everything. It's okay. Betty once again thought to herself. That's the way you should be. But then pulled it out of herself at that age to dare to correct the mistakes of 20 years ago. Not everyone does. Already for that you can forgive some of Adriana's sins. Cindy helped Christina down to the platform, and then not. Well, yes, we'll take a cab or take public transportation. It's a pretty decent distance. Adriana, but on public transportation, baby, let those women who don't value themselves at all ride. Cindy smiled. Well, in principle, the decision is the right one. It'll be evening soon. I don't think the buses run that long here. Kathy and Clara were setting the table. They were both nervous, but Kathy was stubbornly nervous. Stabbing. Slaga even had to give her a sedative. Kathy, what's wrong with you? Michael's on his way home with a friend. It's okay though. Yes, I understand, Sarah. But I don't know, I just don't feel good, that's all. I'm the one who should be worried. What if Michael has fallen out of love with me? Kathy laughed. What are you talking about? How could Michael fall out of love with you? You're so beautiful. Kathy knew what she was talking about. Was not spoiled by beauty salons and other feminine tricks. She was endowed with natural beauty. But Kathy insisted that Olya changed her hair a little, began to wear heels. At first the girl didn't seem to like it. But now her mother-in-law looked at her with pleasure and compared her with that shy girl Michael had brought. Not a drop of makeup, modest jeans, and a jacket. Naturally, the sneakers that all young people of the country are wearing now. In principle, it's the same Clara, only the hair, a little shorter and a little longer. Light, almost imperceptible makeup, a skirt just above the knee, and now an integral part of a stylish closet high heels. There's a car at the house on the signal. Oh, here we are. Clara suddenly stopped halfway to the door. Kathy laughed. Come on, Clara. Meet Dima too. During the year that Slaga lived with Kathy, they became very good friends. Kathy was not disappointed in her daughter-in-law. On the contrary, the girl reminded her very much of herself when she was young. Clara stood up for the truth, never passed by someone who needed help. So she had a young cat in the house, which the girl, risking her own life, caught on the river in Bologna. Kathy then scolded her so much not for the cat, but because she was very frightened. No cat, even the most beautiful one, is worth your life. What if you'd fallen off if you'd fallen? Would you have thought of that? Michael arrived and you didn't. Slaga smiled and remained silent. Why are you smiling? You know, Kathy, it's so nice when you fight with me. It's been a long time since anyone has been so worried about me. Kathy just flailed her arms. I mean, look at her. I'm trying to tell her that she can't do that. She's like Smith, and she's in the middle of nowhere. In fact, they both realized that swing. Ginger cat, hungry, dirty, and skinned, tied them together even more than the fact that they were now related. 2 weeks. The two of them had nursed him back to health, fed him. And now, the shaggy beauty just couldn't get out of their arms. Clara jumped outside. Kathy followed. She saw her son right away. She saw no one else but Michael, my son, and he kissed his wife soundly, throwing her a surprised look, then grabbed her and her mother in an armful and surrounded her. How have I missed you two? After a few seconds, set them on the ground. Mother Slaga, meet my comrade, this is Liam. Slaga, we have to get him married in 2 weeks. Slaga smiled. So Kathy's life has flooded everyone. Let's go inside. We've already got the table set. Everything's hot. Liam and Michael looked at each other strangely. Mom, here's the thing. There's another person coming with us. Kathy felt her legs weakening. She didn't know what was wrong. Mom, don't worry. I found Dad. Clara and Simeon picked Kathy up from both sides because she started to fall. The woman tried to pull herself together. Mommy doesn't remember anything at all. Michael opened the car door and Ethan got out. He was still thin, but clean-shaven in a suit cut. Ethan. They all heard a long, low scream. Ethan suddenly jerked as from the current he stared at her, then took a step forward. Kathy. She threw herself at him, and Ethan was already shouting across the street. Kathy is mine. Michael watched in amazement as his father wrapped his arms around his mother and pulled her against him. Liam muttered, "Here comes the stress." You think he remembered everyone. He sure did. Look at him. 10 minutes, if not more. Kathy and Ethan stood there with their arms around each other. No one was in their way. What's 10 minutes? Compared to the time they hadn't seen each other. Finally, Kathy pulled away. Ethan, if you only knew how much I've been waiting for you. I didn't believe for a minute that you were dead. Kathy, if it hadn't been for Michael. He killed his son. Wow. I have a grown-up military son that you, Kathy, raised alone. Tears ran down Ethan's cheeks. Why are you here so far from Moscow? Kathy didn't have time to answer. Hello, please tell me if Kathy Jackson lives here. A cab car stopped near them, and a beautiful dark-haired girl got out. She was holding a notebook. Yes. Kathy looked at her in surprise. I'm sorry. Who are you? Adriana got out of the car. It was obvious that the woman had been napping on the road, and now she was squinting in the sun, trying to get a good look at everyone on the street. Yes, that's exactly who Kathy didn't expect to see here. So many kilometers away from Moscow, Betty got out of the car. Kathy looked at her mother-in-law in silence. "Kathy, I came to see you because I couldn't live with myself. I thought I could die in peace, but I couldn't. I was tormented by conscience and longing. I came here to apologize. I realize that it's not my forgiveness, that such things are not forgiven. But forgive me, forgive me. I've been very nasty. It only seems that I don't care. I should have fallen at your feet a long time ago. I was so ashamed I wanted to die. And now I realize that the grave sin is not for us." The old woman knelt down. Michael and Kathy rushed to her. They lifted her up. Betty was crying. That's the kind of companion she was. She had certainly never seen one. Cindy, too, was flapping her long eyelashes in surprise. During the journey, she had already gotten used to the fact that the characters, and in general the nature of the old lady was so. Adriana's mother froze. She could already hear Ethan's voice. Tears made it hard to get a good look at her. Not Kathy, not her grandson. "Mommy, hello." And then the woman saw. "Ethan, my son. We had to call an ambulance after all." Adriana, I felt so bad that she fainted, and she immediately said it was real. The doctor made an appointment, said the woman was strong, just overexcited. Everyone forgot about the table. Kathy and Ethan sat by Adriana's bedside, and she kept talking in low voices and holding her hand, Kathy and Ethan at times. Betty dozed quietly on the couch. Michael, Liam, Clara, and Cindy were sitting on a bench in the yard. Liam sighed. "Look, I never thought in my life that I'd be a part of such a family history. In fact, I always thought it could only happen on TV." Cindy smiled. "That's for sure." Michael his wife and said, "You know what, Liam? I think I'll take time out and listen here. My wife is a young mom, now a dad and grandma too." Liam gave him a quick glance. "You'll take it up with Mom, of course, but she's already had hers. Is it possible to hold a grudge for so long?" "You're probably right. Here we'll have 2 children at once." "Clara." The woman pressed herself against him harder instead of answering. Liam sighed. "I envy you, brother, with white envy. I won't have such a scenario." Cindy immediately asked, "Aren't you 2 married?" And they looked at each other. But then Kathy and Ethan came outside. I was amazed at how much my mother had changed, and my father's eyes were shining. "Well, has everybody gone into hiding? We shouldn't have saved so much salt." Everybody to the table. Liam immediately gave his elbow to Cindy. "May I escort you to the table?" Cindy jokingly curtsied and put her hand on Liam's arm. Later, when it was time to put everyone to bed, Liam whispered to Michael, "Something tells me that I won't be in a hurry to sign a new contract this time either." Adriana managed to convince everyone that they would be better off in Moscow. There's plenty of room for everyone. Ethan needs a checkup. Young people need to live. There are more opportunities there. I'll be happy. If you're around every day, I'll ask for forgiveness. Kathy looked at Ethan, at Michael. But it's for the men to decide in any case. In 3 weeks, the whole big company was leaving for Moscow. Kathy was reduced to sobbing. Her students, led by William Smith, came to the station to see her off. They even brought flowers, which made Kathy's tears flow. Liam, too, was traveling with them. Just yesterday, he had made Cindy an offer she could not refuse, namely to marry him. Betty imagined the shocker Sam would be in when he was informed. The train moved. Everyone stared out the window in inertia. Everyone was thinking about something else, but no one else in the company had any sad thoughts. Ethan hugged Kathy. "I told you I'd be back." Subscribe and click the bell. I don't understand what the problem is. If I am 43 years old and I have never been married, and I have no children, for some reason, my relatives don't like this situation at all. Their only desire in this life is to help me start a family. But how can they not realize that help is needed only when they ask for it? I have never regretted being single for a second. Not having children is such a gift from God. In fact, it's entirely my fault. I've always been careful. Protection above all else. Otherwise, at some point in your life, your potential children will come to you from all over the country, even from places you've never been. The mother, of course, is the one who worries the most. Even when my father was alive, she constantly tried to organize meetings with potential candidates for the role of my wife. All this looked as if quite by chance, the daughter of my mother's friend or colleague, or one of her students came to visit us. The options for calling these damsels names were countless. When her father passed away, she became more obsessive. In addition to constantly arranging so-called chance encounters, this is how she began to constantly drip on my brain. After I celebrated my 40th birthday, it was like she went crazy. It got to the point where I couldn't live with her. Basically, I was never ashamed of living with my parents. I was fine with it. I only came to this house to sleep over or have dinner. I work all the time. Even on weekends, I wanted to always get a big paycheck to constantly develop in this field. I did get more and more money every month, but still it was not enough for me. Why should I give up money if all I need to do is to spend a little more time in the office? I did not aspire to be a supervisor. Unlike a supervisor, my earnings depended only on myself, and he had a fixed salary periodically. My salary was more than his by a factor of 1.5 to 2 times. So, what's wrong with an ordinary working man? Apart from that, there were other pluses in the fact that I was an ordinary staff worker, while on the colleagues occupying managerial positions, girls hung like on the hanger of the theater outerwear. There wasn't as much attention directed at me. I was fine with that. I was not at all turned on by the fact that the girls saw me as a huge wallet. I like to choose a girl myself and pursue her. I don't know how to woo. I used all the conventional ways. Of course, all these years I really tried to find my soulmate. But my longest relationships have lasted no more than 5 months. The last relationship sucked all the energy out of me. I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Her name was Kathy. She was 20 years younger than me. I thought it was kind of cool at first. She had an energy inside her that spread to those around her. For some reason, at the bar, she had her eye on me. I tried my best to ignore her. I didn't want to get involved with underage girls. But then she managed to get me talking. Kathy turned out to be a nice person to talk to, and the time flew by. That's how we talked. And in the morning, I woke up in my bed with this girl lying on my chest. Her beautiful, long, curly, red hair was lying on the pillow, and part of it covered her bare breasts. I'll be honest, she looked stunning in the morning sunlight. I was so engrossed that at times I forgot to breathe so as not to wake her up. From that day on, our so-called love began. That girl did unimaginable things to me, manipulated me any way she wanted. I fell for it. I did everything she wanted. I bought her a car after a month. Yes, not a new one, but still, jewelry, a fur coat, even though it was summer. Travel. I gave her everything. And what I got in return? What did I get in return? Sex. And that's about it. She didn't cook, she didn't clean. She partied all the time. It's getting a little hard for me to live at her pace. I wouldn't mind her partying all the time, as long as she was happy. But every time she didn't get enough. I didn't understand what I needed to do to make her calm down, settle down. I even asked her, but she only put forward conditions under which she was willing to bring peace to my world. But she never kept her promises. Every time she returned home, all intoxicated and intoxicated. Sometimes I thought it wasn't just the alcohol. But personally, I did not force her for this action and did not find anything suspicious at home. It was over in a flash. Somehow I wanted to please her, to arrange a romantic evening. So I did not, as usual, delayed at work. I went home right after the end of the day. On the way, I stopped by the store to buy a bunch of flowers. I knew she was home because just before I got there, she had called me and complained that her friends had canceled a meeting and she didn't know what to do that evening. I got home, walked into the hallway, and immediately ran through the apartment without noticing anything around the dining room was gone. Her in the living room went to the bedroom too. Well, you guessed what I saw there. As in the most bearded anecdotes, my beautiful, young, red-haired beauty was swallowed by some young man with milk on his lips. Not absolutely. Oh yeah. For all that, they were both naked and I stayed to watch it. They didn't notice me until about 7 minutes later. That's when I turned around and went into the living room. A couple minutes later, they both ran out of the bedroom. The guy headed straight for the exit, and Kathy headed for me. Why are you looking at me like it's my fault? I mean, it's not a big deal. David, I agree that it's an unpleasant situation, but let's be honest, it's entirely your fault. What are you out of your mind? How am I so guilty that you decided to ride another man? David, well, that's a lot of heat. It's very simple. You're a grown man and you should know where your behavior is leading. You chose me, knowing I'm half your age. You get caught up in work all the time, and I have certain needs. Henceforth, so that this doesn't happen again, pay more attention to me. Kathy, do you even see what you're saying? I'm always stuck at work because your appetites are growing by the day. And please tell me, when have I ever dared to deny myself your carnal needs? Well, it's never happened. I'm sure you deny me. Are you trying to make me complex? It's just that sometimes I have wild urges that need to be curbed, but you're not around. So sometimes I have to look for other options. I have to look. So it wasn't the only time, and you're so calm about it. No, it wasn't. Are you not hearing me at all? Well, reevaluate your life, and then we'll be fine. To say I was shocked is like saying nothing. I've never encountered such insolence. I'll be honest, I believed for a split second that I really was at fault for what had happened. I had to pull myself together, so I slapped my cheeks a couple times, and that helped. And then I got up, went into the hallway, grabbed Kathy's bag, then headed into the kitchen. The girl was drinking tea and looking out the window. I walked over to her, picked her up in my arms. Kathy thought I had admitted guilt and had come to make up. However, that was not the case. I went to the hallway and opened the front door. Kathy began to suspect something, so she started to pull away. But my grip was ironclad. I set her barefoot on the cold tile. Paul threw the bag on the floor and closed the door. Kathy still tried to bang on the door for a while and screamed all over the floor, but as soon as I threatened her with the police, she left. The girl was not happy that all her things were left at home, but I didn't care what she was wearing. Let her be happy that I left the car to her and go to the damn grandmother. After a while, I learned from acquaintances that Kathy knew from the beginning how much money I was making. That's why he was grooming me so much at the bar during our first meeting. At that moment, everything fell into place, and I was a fool to fall for her. It was probably just passion, though. If I had really fallen for her, I wouldn't have gotten rid of her so easily. Anyway, from that moment on, I wasn't interested in relationships anymore. All 3 years, I just chose women for fun even and did not hide my income. Then things got easier. I just picked one day a week, went to a bar, and got what I wanted. If it was a busy week, I'd go to the bar 2 or 3 times. Mom saw my behavior change. She was always finding reasons for me to come to her when I met her, playing the same old songs. To be honest, I just let everything she said pass me by. After a while, I realized I couldn't let it go. Something must be done to calm my mother down. If she calmed down, my life would be at peace. I could think of nothing better to do than to find a fake bride. I had to choose a middle-aged woman because my mother would not fall for a young girl and continued to brainwash me. There were no single adult women in my neighborhood. I decided to look in the park. There was no time to wait, and it was Saturday. It was getting close to sundown, so there were a lot of people there. Probably a lot of visitors thought I was a maniac because I glare at every woman who even remotely fit my criteria. When I realized that I was frankly sad, I put on my glasses. I didn't want to end up for such a misunderstanding. And in the monkey house, they'd put a couple of cases on me. After 40 minutes, I found a woman who matched my requirements perfectly. I could tell she was a homemaker, but she wasn't a gray mouse. She looked delicious. A lot of young girls wouldn't have been on a par with her. Next to the woman was a boy of about 15 and a girl who was no more than 4 years old. I watched this family for about 30 minutes, and that's because I couldn't see. Is there a wedding ring on the ring finger of my potential bride's right hand? I tried to look from all angles, but nothing worked. Then I decided that I would sort of accidentally bump into her, and if there was no ring, I would meet her right away. I walked towards her and pushed her with my shoulder. Apparently, I didn't calculate my strength because the lady fell on the lawn. I didn't see that coming, and I was stunned. "Where are you going?" The guy brought me out of my trance. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I really didn't see you. You're all right." I rushed over to the woman to help her up. I was really afraid I'd hurt her. "Yes, thank you. I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm sure you didn't do it on purpose." God, how wrong was she? My face was getting angry paint. "Charles, don't be so rude. Not all people do harm on purpose. For God's sake, forgive my nephew. He's always protecting me since my husband left me." My gaze slid down her arm. There really was no ring. That's good news. What's even better news is that, pray tell, it's only her nephew. That fact made it much easier, because young boys are very wary of a potential stepfather, albeit a fictitious one. And I understand this is your young protector. You can tell he's ready to snatch me up with just a look. "Charles, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your aunt. Or maybe you did, but on the bed. She's a very pretty mademoiselle. I'd like to rectify the situation." "How is that possible?" "Well, for starters, I can take you to the infirmary so we can all make sure you're all right." "You what?" "Take it easy. But I've been rolling around in the grass a little bit. There's Betty already rolling around in the park every day." The woman pointed to the girl who was lying on the lawn with her own grass. "Well, then maybe we can get acquainted, and I'll buy you dinner, all of you." I stand corrected. We can get acquainted. I have to know the name of the person I'm supposed to avoid, in order not to end up on the grass again, the woman said with a smile. "My name is Adriana." "You have a very beautiful name, Adriana," said I in a languid voice, extending my hand. "And I am David. Our names sound similar. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we met." "Well, I don't know. It wasn't what you'd call a pleasant encounter." She seemed more confident than I first thought. "So how about dinner?" "My treat. Everybody dance, as they say." That's when the kid's eyes lit up. Apparently, his parents and Adriana didn't spoil him with much in the way of goodies. "All right, but we'll have dinner without the kids." But the aunt pulled Charles' no aunts. "Take Betty's hand and go home. There's everything in the refrigerator so you can satisfy your hunger. The adults need to talk." 3. "What's that for?" "Let me drive them home." "Why walk? And you won't have to worry." "I'm not gonna worry about it. We live a block away from this park. The boys won't even have to cross a busy road." At that moment, Charles took her hand, showed us his tongue, and the girl repeated after him. The sight was very cute. A genuine smile stretched across my face. The guys headed towards the exit of the park. I hesitated a bit as I didn't know what to do with Adriana, whether to give her a hand or not. I mean, she had just fallen. Maybe she really needed my help. There were already a few sparks running between us, though, so the gesture could be interpreted differently. And I wouldn't want that, because the woman I was looking for was fictitious. She had a role to play. I wasn't interested in anything else. Adriana. The first one headed toward the exit, and I, not knowing what to do, put my hands behind my back. I probably looked like a prisoner, but I didn't care. The important thing was not to ruin something that wasn't even there yet. I walked the woman to my car, opened the door for her like a true gentleman. I got behind the wheel, and we drove off. At that moment, I had no idea where we were going. I had to pick a mid-range establishment, so to speak, so she wouldn't think I was courting her. On the way to another neighborhood, I saw a small restaurant and stopped outside of it. The hostess took us to a table on the veranda. The place was delightful, and so was the view. It was already sunset, and the sky was going from bright blue to deep purple, and in the middle was a streak of red. Adriana looked ravishing. For her age, I was sure she'd order some standard Kaiser. We'll talk. However, the woman surprised me. She ordered lamb kebab and young potatoes. I don't know what was on my face, but when she looked up at me, she said, "You probably know what it's like to spend all day with kids and feet." "I'm lying around and hungry as a dog," said the woman and burst into loud laughter. Unfortunately, I can't imagine what you are experiencing. I don't know how you perceive my facial expression, but I was just surprised that a woman with such a beautiful figure eats potatoes with mutton. Oh, I was shy. So don't be shy. Order whatever you want, I said with a smile. No, let's stop here, or I'll change now, and then I'll want to sleep. I won't care what you talk to me about. I will demand that you take me home. What do you say? Tell me about your children. I understand Charles is your nephew. And Betty. Who's Betty? Daughter? You could say that, but more specifically, if you don't mind. A daughter. A daughter who decided to have a baby as an adult. You are tactfully silent, but I can see that you want to ask me what. How old am I? You don't have to deny it. I can see it in your eyes. Of course, it's indecent for a woman to ask such a question. But I'm not the hidden type. I'm 40 years old and you're 43. Wow. How did you know that? It didn't even take you long to figure it out. I've known you for as long as I've known you. I've been intuitive since I was a child. My father trusted me to pick lottery tickets when I was very young. And guess what? We hit the jackpot. So keep in mind, I can be very useful to you. Adriana had a wide smile on her face, which mesmerized my gaze. Shall we switch to you? I suggested, for I was tired of this officiousness. Let's do it. I began to ask Adriana about her life. I needed to find the perfect woman for the role of a bride, albeit a fictitious one. My mother was a smart, wise woman. She was determined to every little detail. So everything had to be perfect, impossible to tamper with. It turned out that Adriana owned one of the drugstore chains in our town. That was a good thing. The woman had everything she needed, which meant she had no claim on my money. Adriana would have wanted to step away from her business a long time ago and turn the chain of pharmacies over to someone else, but she couldn't trust anyone. The woman said she would run the outlets as long as she could. Then she would simply sell the business. Adriana was a very pleasant person to talk to. To be honest, I didn't want to ruin the evening with my proposal. Adriana was worth more than that. And I was almost certain that my proposal would offend the woman. But it was worth a try, as they say. Adriana, I have a confession to make. I only ask one thing. You listen to me all the way through before you jump to conclusions. Sounds interesting. Well, let's give it a try. I'm listening. I took in a full chest of air. My heart began to pound harder, echoing in my ears. It was no longer acceptable to back up. Adriana, I didn't crash into you by accident, but I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. When I saw you on the lawn, I freaked out and cursed myself with all the right words in the world. I meant to hit you gently with my shoulder, but I didn't realize the force. So I'm prepared to apologize to you for the rest of my life. I'm so ashamed. Shut up, please, I said between words as I saw Adriana open her mouth to say something. I'll go on. Why did I do it? That's the question you're asking. I wanted to meet you, but I didn't see you. Is there a wedding ring on your finger? I thought I'd check it that way. Again, I'm sorry, please. After that, I got to the point. I told the woman about how my mother cares for me despite my advanced age. Of course, I was afraid to seem like a mama's boy in her eyes. However, I could not pass this part of the story about myself. Then I smoothly came to the fact that my mother's cherished dream is that I have a family. Adriana, please, there's not much left. You see, her obsession had become so unbearable that I was almost desperate, so I decided on one strange act. Introduce my mother to a fictitious bride. The woman interrupted me. I was blown away by her insight. No, you had to. I was trying to make it sound veiled. Did I just blurt it out to her? I'm not gonna ask you how you figured it out, but yes, you're right. I thought it was a fake relationship. Please note, not a marriage, but a relationship. It's the best way out of this situation. Well, you know, my mother's not gonna be fooled. She can detect deception. I didn't want some girl who'd do anything for money. I wanted an older woman. You mean old? No? Adriana, no. You can't find a smart woman these days. That's why I looked and looked, and I chose you. Jesus, you've been following me around in a frightened tone of voice, she said. Not just today. I've been watching you for half an hour. Anyway, I've decided you'd be perfect for the role. I'm willing to offer you anything. Please help me. Sounds very strange, to be honest, but I've always been very adventurous. So I guess I'll take it. But I have one condition. I agree to all say that I have not fallen in love with me, that you have not fallen in love with me. I speak Russian, yes. I ended up laughing. It's been a long time since anyone made me laugh like that. I mean, come on. Was she really so sure of herself that she would assume I was falling in love with her? She's an attractive woman, no doubt. But you don't fall in love with someone like her when you're older. They choose them for a home that's cozy and clean and smells of borscht and hockey sticks. I promise, Adriana, that I do not fall in love with you, I said with a slight smile. After that, we were clear on the goals we had to reach. It took us at least an hour and a half to come up with a plan of action. During this time, we drank 2 cups of coffee, and it got dark outside. Not a single star was visible in the sky. It was covered with clouds and a light breeze came up. But it was cold, so I took off my jacket and threw it over Adriana's shoulders. I'm a gentleman. What a nobody. There was no time to delay. So we scheduled the meeting with my mother for tomorrow. Despite the fact that Adriana was an elegant woman, I asked her to observe some dress code. No cleavage, no skirts above the knees, no loose hair. My mother considered all women who didn't adhere to these criteria very frivolous. And what man would want his fiancée to be considered as such, even if it was fictitious? After the discussion, we went home. I drove Adriana home. She actually lived in the heart of the city in a swanky new housing complex. I even managed to get a good look at her windows because Charles was standing in one of them, and 4-year-old Betty's head was sticking out of the other. They were waiting for a woman not 1 o'clock. At this point, I even felt ashamed. It was because of me. They'd spent so much time alone. I hoped they weren't hungry. If they'd come to dinner with us then, I probably wouldn't have told Adriana everything. And the kids don't need to hear that. Adriana left, and I headed home. That night must have been endless. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get the thought out of my head that our plan was going to fail. And then I remembered the woman's words when she asked me not to fall in love with her. A smile spread across my face. It felt so warm. But I didn't understand why this was happening, and shook my head sharply, as if to empty it. I must have fallen asleep in the morning. So when the alarm clock rang, I didn't even realize where I was. Like a robot, I got up, washed my face, and went to work. I stopped at a coffee shop on the way and got a double espresso. I needed a dose of pep. I took 3 sips. I was going to repeat the purchase, but I thought the effect would come a little later. And I was right. For the first hour at work, I just sat there staring at the wall. How could I write program code if I forgot even my name from excitement? Not to mention the name of my so-called fiancé. When the vigor began to appear in me, I immediately got to work. The cat was pissing himself. My fingers couldn't keep up with my thoughts. I was sure that at the end of the working day I would discover mistakes, but I was wrong. The program worked the first time. It helped to cheer me up even more. I urgently needed to come to my senses because the meeting with my mother was getting closer. Right after the end of the workday, I went home, showered, shaved, and styled my hair. Everything has to be a high level. Otherwise, my mother wouldn't believe the scam. After I realized I looked amazing, I went to pick up Adriana. As I drove up, I noticed she was already waiting for me at the entrance. She looked amazing. She was wearing a classic black background dress that developed easily in the wind, a 3/4 arm on her feet, classic boat shoes, and in her hands a wisp of delicate purple that matched her belt perfectly. This woman certainly had taste. As Adriana got into the car, I could smell the scent of her perfume. It was different from the one she had been wearing yesterday. The day before, she smelled of the sea and freshness. Today, it was a pleasant floral scent with a slight sweetness. "Hi." I held out my hand, hoping she would put her graceful hand in it. "You look stunning." "Hello, David. Really, all your wishes are taken care of?" she asked. A slight smile appeared on her face. I was staring so hard that I didn't even realize we were already holding hands. "You're more than ready. Let's go." Adriana bowed and waved as if the coachman was sitting in front of us. I didn't hesitate. I started the car, pressed the gas pedal, and drove toward my mother's house. Adriana and I had a pleasant conversation on the way. She was talking about how Charles and Betty had greeted her warmly yesterday. The boys had missed their aunt and mom so much that they had decided to make her dinner. True, it was very different. They served her a salad of red fish apples, crab sticks, and mayonnaise. Adriana recounted that she tried her best to pretend that it was the most exquisite dish she had ever tasted in her life. She prayed to God that the kids would get away from her as soon as possible so she could stop eating that salad. She told it so emotionally that I couldn't keep from laughing. Tears came to my eyes, which made me unable to see the road well. The woman made me laugh so hard that I had to park in the first place I could find. When we pulled up to my mother's house, my heart sank. I knew it was all fictitious, but I was worried as if Adriana was really my fiancée. The woman gently took my hand and told me not to worry. She promised that everything would go off to the best of her ability. I believed her because she was a wise and responsible woman. I think that if she could not fulfill my request, she would have given up on the scam right away. She was not the kind of person who could and liked to lose. More accurately, no one likes to lose. However, some people aren't even upset by it. They take it for granted. We got out of the car, and from that moment on we looked like a couple in love. After all, my mother could stand at the window and watch us. Adriana took me under her arm, and like a gallant cavalier I led her to the entrance, opened the door, and held her close. When we took the elevator to the floor we needed, we found that the door to the apartment was already open, and half of my mother's face was peering out of it. She was too curious. "But couldn't you just wait in the apartment? That's where we're going anyway." "Hello, my son, my good son." God, I couldn't believe it. That you would come to me today, and not alone at the expense of Metal Mother. "Hello, Mom. What did you think I was doing, lying to you?" "Meet my girlfriend, Adriana." Adriana walked up to her mother and extended her hand. Mom responded to her welcoming gesture. "Adriana, I'm so glad my dummy has you, but don't get too excited. It's just that we haven't met at all yet. It's nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you. Of course, of course. Let's get acquainted. Why are you standing in the hallway? Come into the hall. David, help your bride." "Mom, we're going out." "Well, it's not hard for a girl to grow up to be a bride. I'm sure you won't drag this out too long. I'm not young at all. And I'd like to babysit grandchildren very much." Adriana's mom turned around and gave me her beautiful smile. It was obvious that the woman was feeling a little awkward. I can't imagine how much the discomfort level would have increased if we were actually dating. Mom was pushing us when we were still in the hallway. What would happen when we made our way into the living room? I had no idea at the time. A sumptuous table was set in the hall. The food was as good as a restaurant's in appearance. Even for a second, I thought that my mom had hired a chef to prepare all these delicious dishes. Of course, that wasn't actually true. My mom had a lifelong love of cooking, and she did it deliciously. Her dishes were not only delicious, but beautiful as well. Over the years, she had honed her skills. We sat down at the table, so there was no doubt in my mother's mind that we were dating. We sat very close to each other, so our hands and feet were touching. At this point, I noticed that my body was responding to this kind of contact. I had to remember the not-so-great moments of my life, so as not to embarrass myself. But I thought Adriana had noticed something, because she looked at me with a sly look and a smile that said, "Yeah, so maybe we'll have a real relationship, I can see that." It made me very uncomfortable. "Adriana, well, tell me what you do in life." The woman happily began to tell me about herself. I started to worry that she wouldn't say too much, because she was very enthusiastic. My mom listened with interest. I could see from her face that she was pleased that Adriana had her own chain of pharmacies. She even joked that she now knew where to go with the list of medicines that the doctor would make at the appointment, because the treatment was very expensive. At first, I wanted to ask her why she was going to be treated, but then I bit my tongue, because at her age, all the sores come out. "Adriana, how old are you?" "Mom, isn't it unseemly for you to be so hard on her? But I have to know if your woman can give birth to you or not. I can see she's not a girl anymore." After saying that, I was speechless. That's when my mother became so tactless. How could she even say such a thing? Looking at her face, I realized that she didn't regret the question she asked. The silence was awkward and dragged on. Adriana realized she had to do something. "Honey, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm 40 years old," she said with a soft smile. 40, her mother said thoughtfully. "That's menopause. It is not a fact that you will be able to get pregnant." "Mom, come on, Mom, who's going to take care of you if not me? Maybe she'll leave you when she realizes she can't give birth to you." "Mom, God, honey, calm down. You know that in today's world, medicine doesn't stand still. If you can't get pregnant naturally, you can use IVF. It's such a small thing." I marveled at how my fictitious fiancée kept her composure, and the insults flying at her weren't fictitious at all. What normal person wouldn't take offense at something my mother said, no matter who that person was? He would feel insulted. But IVF is nice, but it doesn't feel real. "Don't worry, I've got kids. They can help relieve your loneliness if you need it." God, why did she have to say that? This is a real failure, I thought, and I was right. I can see why you're not so worried about getting pregnant. It's just that you already have kids and don't need any more. Mom, please, let's just drop the subject. We did close the subject. I realized that I had a conversation with my mother ahead of me. I was sure she'd be crazy about Adriana. But from the very doorstep, she wasn't satisfied with her age. The interesting thing is that she wouldn't be satisfied with the age of the bride. In any case, she would arise that she was too young and would leave me, and the other one was old and would not bear me children with my mother. There was no golden mean. The rest of the time we talked about distracted topics. Mom was already unwilling to continue the event, and Adriana masterfully built herself a fool who supposedly does not understand anything. That's commendable. After all, one should treat one's mother-in-law with leniency, even if it is a fictitious one. I'm sure that this behavior of my companion, Mom, was even angrier. She liked it when people reacted painfully to her words. Mom thought she was always telling the truth. I thought she was just being rude. I didn't have the energy to continue the evening. So Adriana and I cited fatigue and left Mother's house. At the threshold, my mother reached out to kiss me goodbye and whispered in my ear, "See your lady off and come back to me to talk." Shit, that's what I was most afraid of. But I didn't let on. Adriana took my hand. and we headed for the elevator. We didn't say anything until we were out of the elevator and in the car. And Adriana, please forgive her. I'm just shocked. I had no idea she'd act like this. She's always been like this, but not on the day she met her future daughter-in-law. How could she even say that? You're at a normal age. Do you hear me, normal? I started yelling as I drove to her house. David, stop it. She's right here. As a mother, I wouldn't be happy with your choices either. You're a young man. You need children. And a woman like me would not be able to give birth to you, or I'd be afraid to. At that age, there can be complications not only for the baby, but for the mother as well. Stop talking nonsense. I was losing my temper. By then I was pulling into Adriana's driveway. I said you're a normal age. I don't think it's as bad as my mother says. I blurted out as I pulled the car over. Prove that you don't think so. With a charming smile, said Adriana. I was confused. I didn't understand what she was expecting from me. My body reacted strangely to her words with some unknown impulse. I threw myself on top of her and kissed her. Her lips were very soft, and I felt an electric shock run through my body. It was a long-forgotten feeling. For several years, no woman had stirred in me such desire as she did today. My hands disobeyed my brain and continued to explore her body. It was beautiful, despite her age. Adriana, on the other hand, also had a genuine desire. It was evident in her demeanor. Her breasts rose higher and higher as her breathing became heavier and heavier. I was somewhat surprised at this turn of events, as I thought that my fictitious bride was responsible for the task I had set for her, namely creating the illusion of an ideal couple, nothing more. But I could tell from her that she had wanted me for a long time, and that fact was a pretty big boost to my self-esteem back then. And not just hers. I don't even remember how we ended up in Adriana's apartment, because I don't think we stopped kissing at all. Her lips were so soft, so passionate. I was starting to taste blood after a lot of kissing. Apparently, Adriana hadn't practiced such long kisses in a long time. Opening the front door, we piled into the apartment. After that, it was like we were blown away. I started tearing off her clothes like a beast and completely stopped thinking about the fact that there might be children in the house. Adriana, as if she sensed that I had that question inside of me. It's okay, they're gone, the woman said with a huff. They are at their grandmother's house, don't worry. After that, I realized that I was allowed to do everything that I had previously been afraid to even imagine. The rest of the time we did not get out of bed. I'll leave out all the details, but I will only say that in the morning I felt as if I had been run over by a roller. All my muscles and joints ached, as if I had not made love. Yesterday I worked out and left world records in weightlifting. When I woke up, Adriana was still in bed and singing sweetly. At some point I realized I couldn't stop looking at her. At that moment she seemed to me the most beautiful creature on this planet. I couldn't understand what this woman had done to me. After all, until a few days ago, I was not interested in anything but my work. Adriana was good too. It turns out she had deceived me. I mean, we agreed beforehand that our relationship would be a sham. And today I'm in bed with her after a hot night I'll probably never forget. I wonder how Adriana will feel when she wakes up. Maybe she'll be ashamed. Or maybe she'll want a sequel. Maybe after this, she'll think I'll marry her. What if I do marry her? I don't reject that possibility at all. I had once thought that this woman would only help me to put my mother's guard down. I didn't think she'd make me go crazy. When Adriana opened her eyes, I pretended like a boy to be asleep. My eyes were slightly open, so I saw everything through my lashes. She lost her eyes with her beautiful hands. After that, she looked at me as if I was the love of her life. Maybe that's how it really was. I guess I'd like to believe it, but I was convinced otherwise. Adriana had a recent love anyway, as evidenced by the presence of her little girl, Betty. The woman had a look on my face. A slight, gentle smile appeared on her face. 15 minutes later, she got up and left the room. At this point, I rolled over onto my back, put my hands behind my head, opened my eyes, and stared up at the ceiling. At first, I just didn't know how to act. It was because I couldn't decide what I felt for this beautiful woman. Fragments of last night's flawless and passionate night began to appear in my mind. For a moment, I fell out of reality and only came back when Adriana appeared in front of my face with a tray in her hands. The fragrant smell of coffee wafted through the room. "Good morning, honey," the woman said casually. The way she addressed me made me speechless. I could only reward her with a slight smile. I hoped that at that moment she thought that I didn't answer her only because I had just woken up. "David, calm down. I can see in your eyes that you're really stressed out about last night. Relax. We're adults. We did what we wanted to do. This whole fake marriage thing really got on your nerves. Your mother didn't give us a hard time last night. If you thought I didn't realize it, I'm offended that you think I'm so stupid. Come on, wake up. The coffee will get cold, and it won't be so refreshing. I know something else that'll perk you up in the morning." I didn't expect myself to say it. I'm embarrassed to ask what it is. "Did I ask you to put the breakfast tray on my nightstand?" There was a look of bewilderment on her face. It amused me even more when her hands were free. I grabbed her wrists and pulled her down onto the bed. The woman was pleasantly surprised. She was smiling and laughing. I continued to do what I hadn't had time to finish during the night. Yes, the night was very short indeed. If it were up to me, I wouldn't have gotten out of bed for 3 days. Maybe she's expressing something in another way. There's no way I can explain the irresistible attraction. My lips explored every inch of her body. I wanted her to feel how hot they were. Her body responded to every kiss I gave her. Goosebumps covered her skin. Her legs, her arms trembled slightly. I don't think I'd ever turned on a woman this hard before yesterday. Yes, it was beautiful. That's how our morning went. Of course, by the time we were done making love, the coffee was already icy, figuratively speaking. To be honest, I didn't care for it at all. I began to catch myself thinking that I felt more than comfortable in the company of this beautiful woman. It was obvious that she had absolutely no regrets. I wondered if she had any feelings for me. Why does she always act like nothing happened? Or is that how it's supposed to be? It's not how it's supposed to be. And there were thoughts going through my head all the time. Sometimes I felt like I was mumbling to myself. Maybe I was. Because after a few minutes of silence, Adriana said, "I told you not to fall in love with me." After saying that, I'm seething. Indeed, she did say that. How could she have known it would end up like this? Why are you looking at me like that? David, when you pushed me in the park, I could see from your face that you liked me. I didn't take your request seriously at first. I thought you were just looking for an excuse to meet me. But after just an hour, I realized you weren't lying. You really wanted to give your mother a show like this. I'm sure it didn't look the same in your head. And you may be surprised now, but in my head, it ended up exactly the way it did. Do you really want to talk about the fact that it was written all over my face that in just a few days you and I would be lying in the same bed together? No, not that literally. I could tell by the look on your face that you didn't mind waking up in bed with me. God, why do you look so scared? Do I look like a witch to you? Relax, I'm not a witch, just very perceptive women. At that moment, I was really in shock. My state of mind was not due to being shrewd, but because she was indeed right. After all, it was then that I chose Adriana from the crowd, not because she looked like a hostess, but because she was unrealistically attractive against the rest. Agree that when you choose your bride, even an efficient one, you would still want her to be beautiful and attractive. That's why I made a mistake. Instead of Adriana, I should have stopped my eyes on some gray, unremarkable mouse. And to make Mom happy, this mouse had to be younger than me, but not by much. Although I don't know what would have to happen for my mom to be happy with my choice. She would probably be pleased only in one case, if she herself had chosen a bride for me from all her students, daughters, friends, nurses, from the district polyclinic. Well, to hell with it, whatever happens. After all, I'm not going to marry her. It's not like I'm a teenager who loses his head to the first woman who gives him a mind-blowing night. But also the morning, of course. I got out of bed, not even bothering to cover myself with something she didn't see there. Walking over to Adriana, I slapped her. I couldn't resist. She's got a delicious figure, I'll give her that. What are we going to do? Shy like a boy? I asked the woman who was stirring my emotions. With what? David, just because we slept together, even if more than once, does not mean that between us urgently need to tie the relationship. It's not going to happen against our will. Are you against it? Aya, honey, you are the one who hired me for a fake relationship, not me. With a gentle smile, Adriana said. There was some confusion on my face. I couldn't find the words to say because I didn't know what expressions of feelings would be appropriate in this situation. Why are you looking at me so guiltily? David, we are well into our 20s. Moreover, well into our 35th decade. You realize how much that phrase terrifies me. But nevertheless, we have the right to do whatever we want and sleep with whomever we want. So what's wrong with that? How can you even say that? It was fantastic. You're an excellent lover and, frankly, a good woman. Unexpectedly, I blurted it out to Adriana. It's all out in the open. At that moment, I felt like a boy in front of an experienced adult woman, because her face didn't show an ounce of confusion. She knew she was good. I was turned on and annoyed at the same time by her self-confidence. Adriana, I'm going to confess to you, even though I don't know what to confess. I really don't know how I feel about you. I don't think I've ever felt this way in my entire life. I just don't know what it is. But then, so be it. She said with a smile. What life will lead to, that we will be happy. But I'll keep my promise anyway. Your mother will be fooled. Even if we don't have a real relationship, it's already a matter of principle for me. She's so old. And your son didn't think so at all this night, Adriana said. I rolled in laughter. I realized that if it was not love, it was obvious adoration. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I never thought that in my old age I would sincerely give flowers and gifts to someone. Adriana and I met 2 or 3 times a week. I didn't want it to be just sex. I knew I wanted something more. I took her out on dates to the best restaurants in town, to last-minute movies, to the theater. I wanted our relationship to be romantic. I knew that sooner or later the candy bouquet period would end, so I wanted it to bring as many positive experiences as possible. Everything was pretty good, but just one thought kept me on my toes. I didn't understand how Adriana felt about me. She was acting dignified, and I would even say reserved. She had never been known for her warmth. In words, in behavior, only when we were in the bedroom. She was ready for me like an affectionate cat. Nightly flings allowed me to let all my emotions out: love, passion, jealousy, anger, and resentment at her coldness. Yes, I did fall in love with her. It took me about 3 weeks to realize it. The realization came the day I woke up in the morning in my apartment, turned on my other side, hoping to hug Adriana. But the other half of the bed was empty. I hoped she had woken up earlier and was now in the kitchen making coffee. I couldn't smell the coffee aroma. However, after going through all the rooms, I realized she wasn't in the apartment. I picked up my phone and found a message on it. Sorry, urgent business. She left. Didn't even have a family yet. I'll see you next week. In that moment, somewhere in my chest, it felt like I had a red-hot spear stabbed into my heart. Why was her message so aloof? Why was she so distant from me? Do I not arouse in her an ounce of tender feeling? I was ready to tear the whole place apart. I realized that I wanted her around me all the time. Not a couple days a week, but 24/7. Why has no other woman in my life ever evoked such feelings in me? Why does she accept my advances? She sleeps with me, but she's not affectionate. I had 1,000 questions, but I guess I was never going to get answers. All this time, we no longer went to visit my mother. In fact, I could have brought any girl to her in whom she would have immediately found 1,000 flaws. After that conversation, my mother told me that she no longer wanted us at her place, and she also disapproved of my choice. Even if we get married, my mother will not come to the celebration, so as not to once again be upset about how old my spouse is. Can you imagine this from my mother, who has been hoping for years for some woman to take me in? And here she was with one of the best options, and still she's not happy. Women, they're nothing but trouble. That's true. Until I had Adriana in my life, the only trouble was with my mother. But now there's two of them, and I lost all sense of ground. I just stopped having confidence in the future. I decided that I would no longer call or write Adriana myself. I'll admit it was unrealistic hard. I wanted to ask the neighbors to tie my hands behind my back, but then I decided it wouldn't help. If I wanted to, I would have typed a message to her, but I held on with all my might to get her out of my head for a moment. I started to drink a little too much alcohol just to relax and stop catching the train of thought that was keeping me from resting. 3 days later, a text came to my phone late at night. I was already asleep, but decided to read it as usually no one texted me this late. It was a message from her long me to stand under the door, and I jumped up like scalded. I didn't immediately realize she was standing outside my apartment. I was trying to get my room in order, grabbing a bunch of stuff and throwing it into my closet. I'm sure she heard all of that. I could directly feel her standing outside the door, smiling. 5 minutes later, at least I didn't think it had been more than that, and I flew up to the front doors, barred by my hair sticking out. Opening the door, I saw Adriana. She was marvelously beautiful. In her hands, she held a bottle of semi-sweet red wine. "Did you clean up?" Adriana asked, smiling. I didn't. I was just sleeping. I didn't immediately realize you were standing outside my apartment. I started making excuses like a kid. Yeah, who was running around your apartment at breakneck speed and banging on the closet doors? Adriana, why would it make you feel better if I told you I did a little scatterbrain? Of course it would make me feel better, but your little bit, that's a lie. A little is no more than 5 minutes. I've been standing here for 20. You have. Oh God, I'm sorry. But why are you standing on the doorstep? Come on in. If you had invited me in sooner, we wouldn't have had to work things out in the common hallway, Adriana said. I sensed she was annoyed. I wanted to beg her forgiveness, but I didn't. I still had some pride left in me. Why should I apologize? If we'd made an appointment beforehand, everything would have been top-notch. She knew that, but now she just showed up unannounced, and I was beginning to wonder why. Maybe you were here with your mistress. Is that it? She was getting jealous. Confidence started to spread. Confidence began to spread throughout her body. Or maybe you were a beer drinker or something. I asked the woman. A smug smile began to appear on my face. I'm jealous. Who do you take me for? What am I? 15 years old. I was just asking. I just wanted to tell you that if you're ever with a girl and I show up uninvited, just don't open the door. Text me. I'll understand. You're entitled to have fun whenever and with whomever you want. She was clearly unhappy that I caught her being jealous, but I understood. Finally, after all this time, she was mine. I wanted to keep playing this game, but I was afraid I'd overdo it. She'd get angry and leave. That's not what I wanted. I demanded her constant presence around me. Walking over to her, I gently brushed a strand of hair out of her face and tucked it behind her ear. My hand slowly descended from her head, Natalia, all the while she looked at me without running. At one point, it seemed to me that what stood in front of me was not a grown woman, but a girl of about 18. She desired me. I could tell. Her shyness repulsed me a little. After all, I had never noticed this quality in the moments of our encounters. I couldn't hold back long and kissed her. God, how long had I waited for this? The few days we hadn't seen each other seemed like an eternity. Her coldness made me think that she didn't care about me. But now I realize I was wrong. She tried to deceive me, but her body says otherwise. I'll leave out what happened next. I'll just say it was wonderful. It was like having our first time again. Adriana, why are you trying to pretend? I asked her as she lay on my chest. I mean, what am I faking? You imagined it. It was clear from her voice that she was agitated and trying hard to hide her emotions. Adriana, our entire relationship, I thought I was indifferent to you, and you were with me only because you were interested in participating in the scam I offered you when you disappeared in the morning and disappeared for a few days. I gave myself my word that I wouldn't write you a single message. Do you have any idea how hard that was for me? I started drinking before bed, but there was a fine line. If I drank a little more, I'd be on your doorstep in half an hour. If I drank less, I couldn't sleep because you fogged my judgment, and I couldn't think of anything but you. And what makes you think I'm pretending? Raising her tone slightly, Adriana asked. Now she no longer looked like a self-sufficient adult who knew the value of her time and feelings. Everything remained as it was. Adriana, why are you deceiving me? You're acting differently now. In my eyes, you're like a young girl who's overcome with jealousy. Just because you think you are, doesn't mean you are. Maybe you're the one who sees me that way. But in the eyes of others, I haven't changed. Adriana, tell me. She lay on my chest again and was silent for about 5 minutes. And then she sucked in a breath. What did she scream? What do you want to hear? That I love you? Yes, I do. Why was I acting like that? Because I didn't want to admit it to myself. I'm 40 years old. What love? Even before we met, I believed in love. My last boyfriend looked quite solid and respectable, but in reality, he turned out to be a common Alfonso. Oh God, yes. If he'd only been an Alfonso, I wouldn't have cared so much. He humiliated me, and he stole from me. Do you have any idea how I feel? I'm scared, David. I don't want what we have to turn into something more. You know, people move in and out all the time. Breakups are inevitable. Even though you know you have no future with that person, it still hurts so much when he leaves you. What makes you think that if we get back together, we'll break up? You're setting yourself up for negativity. In this case, of course, nothing good can come of it. You'll always look for faults in me. Like now, you came here for a reason. You're used to me writing you almost every day. And now I've disappeared. You didn't come here mostly because you missed me, but because you were sure I had someone. No, that's not true. Adriana looked at me with eyes of her own. She knew she was lying, and it was very obvious. Okay, you win. Yes, I'm jealous, yes. It was crazy to me when you stopped texting me. I thought you were just trying to get rid of me in my long life. I've been dumped by men a few times without saying anything. That's what annoys me the most. If you've fallen out of love, say so. If you have someone else, say so. And you look for the easiest ways, not thinking that you will bring a lot of pain to the person who loves you more than anything else in the world. Adriana, calm down. You're acting like you just ran into my apartment and found some girl in my bed, sitting on top of me. She came on top of me. I was asleep. Then I woke up and started cleaning up fast. Scattered all over the couch. What's your beef with me? Why are you acting like this? Why can't you just accept a situation where we love each other? Even if you're sure it's not forever, it might be a good idea to live in the present, not the past, not the future. If you're happy here and now with me, why should you care about what will happen in a month or a year? At that moment, I turned my eyes to Adriana and saw that tears were streaming down her cheeks. More than anything, I disliked women who cried. It had to do with the fact that I just didn't know how to act. I hugged her, kissed the top of her head, but I couldn't find the right words. You can't say the right thing when you don't know the reason for the tears. We sat on the bed for about 10 minutes, her crying on my chest and me stroking her hair. After that, I found the strength to tell her how I felt about her. The woman began to calm down. Her sobs became quieter and quieter. The tears were no longer flowing so heavily. Yes, we had such a difficult conversation a month after we met. It's very difficult when two adults with broken hearts meet and realize they have some magical feelings for each other. It's always a scary moment. I understood him like no one else because I felt the same way. I've been through betrayal and lies, but I don't want to think about it now. At that time, what I wanted most of all was to live today, to feel it as much as possible, not caring about what awaits us in a year or two. I realized that Adriana wanted the same thing, but had a lot of fear. Despite this, we started dating her. To be honest, I wanted us to move in together. However, Adriana was against it. I did not put pressure on her as I realized that she needed time to make sure that I would not bring her harm and pain. Despite this, we went on dates every day. It was a magical time for me. I enjoyed every second I spent with her by my side. Adriana really stopped being the willful person she seemed at first. She was turning into a young girl in love. I liked that so much. It seemed to me that this woman was a combination of contradictory qualities. I didn't know what to expect from her in any given situation. Sometimes she would reprimand me like a strict teacher, and sometimes she would make me steal lilacs from the flower beds. Sometimes she wanted to watch some art house movie, and sometimes she wanted me to run barefoot across the lawn. It was really quite entertaining. She'd never acted like that before. In fact, back then, she was still struggling with the warm feeling she had for me. Every date we went on ended in bed. She and I were on the move. We'd go to my apartment or hers. What struck me most was the fact that when we ended up at her apartment, there were never any children there. Adriana said that her nephew was taken by her sister, and she sent her daughter to her mother. I was interested in listening to all her conversations because I knew nothing about her family. For some reason, she kept avoiding the subject. At first, it made me tense, but then I just decided that there were more interesting conversations in the world. But when the topic was about her family, Adriana would always turn the conversation, and Elena would throw kisses at me. At the time, I was fine with that. Sometimes she stayed overnight. And this time, I especially loved, because she always got up before me to make breakfast. And it didn't matter if it was a weekend or a weekday. Most often on such days, I woke up to the ineffable aroma of freshly roasted coffee or her signature airplane. After we ate breakfast, I would get ready for work, tossing in home repairs along the way. Out of habit, I still peered through her windows the same way I did the first time. To be honest, I really wanted to see the kids there. It was a very sweet picture. When I was young, I often dreamed of having a son and a daughter. But things turned out differently. Perhaps my child is out there somewhere, but his mother has chosen to keep quiet about it. If that is the case, I do not judge this woman, because she probably does not know whose child it is. As it happens, the girls I chose were not characterized by any dignity or discretion. I spent the entire workday in torture. At some point, I was ready to take a vacation at my own expense to spend as much time as possible with my beloved. True, I was on my way to my boss to write a request, but halfway there I remembered that Adriana is not unemployed. Nor can she carelessly take a vacation because she has the responsibility of her chain of pharmacies on her shoulders. I never thought that my lover would be a woman who has created such a cool business in our city. Most of all, I was surprised by the fact that she had a masterful understanding of all the drugs. She could explain what to take to get rid of any symptom, but she had no environmental or medical background. I think people like that are gifted. I asked her how she was able to gain so much useful knowledge in her business. The answer was simple. I'm just very inquisitive. Gosh, I am also very inquisitive. However, all my knowledge boils down to my profession only. I have never understood how people can simultaneously study in different faculties, have good grades, and yet not pay bribes. Apparently, Adriana was one of them. Most often after work, she and I would meet and go to some restaurant or cafe to have dinner. But what I loved the most were those moments when she invited me to her house and cooked food with her own hands. Would you know how great of a cook she is? I'm sure her dishes could be on par with some famous chefs, and everything seemed to be going well with us. But there was only one thing that bothered me the most. Somehow, since the day I met her, I'd never seen her daughter or her nephew again. It seemed to me as if she were hiding them from me. I tried to speculate as to why this might be so. However, I could not find a single adequate explanation for her behavior. I had done nothing wrong. On the contrary, I was always interested in how the children were doing, what hobbies they had, what successes they had in their studies. Adriana always responded to my questions in a curt manner and changed the subject. And when I returned to talk about the children, she began to get nervous, although she tried to hide it in every possible way. I began to reassure myself that sooner or later we would start spending time together with the children, because I was sure that we are waiting for a long and happy life together. At some point, we decided to spend a weekend together. I suggested to Adriana that we try living together. She was a little scared when she heard my proposal, but I woke up in time and realized I had said the wrong thing. At that point, all I meant was to spend Saturday and Sunday 24/7 together. It was important to me. That's when I thought I could spend as much time as possible with her daughter. And if I was lucky, my nephew would also come to visit his aunt. Adriana agreed, and I chose the place myself. I didn't want it to be one of our apartments. I wanted this weekend to be something special. I chose an incredibly beautiful chalet by the river. The location was really very picturesque. The landscape designer of the vacation base had tried hard. The owners of the site kept and bred their peacock swans. In a separate paddock were horses, which you could pet. Unless, of course, you were afraid they would bite you. For some unknown reason, Adriana said that she would get to her destination on her own. This surprised me a little. However, I did not resist, as she had every right to do as she saw fit. I arrived at the recreation center a little early to ignite the brazier, prepare the meat and shampoo. My companion turned out to be very punctual, was not late for a single minute. The territory was full of vegetation. Therefore, when in the gap I saw the silhouette of Adriana, I stood with bated breath and waited for the children to appear. However, there were none. "Honey, are you so punctual?" "Hello. You know, I expected to see you in slightly different company." "Actually, I was expecting to see you in company at all. Where did you put Charles and Betty?" "Somehow I was sure they'd be with you." "Hello, my good man. To be honest, I thought the children were coming with me too. However, Charles is being picked up by his mom, and Betty threw a tantrum. She said she wanted to go to Grandma's. I didn't try to talk her out of it, because she wouldn't have let us spend the weekend in peace. Of course, I was a little upset. However, now you and I can do whatever we want for 2 days, if you know what I mean." Adriana said the last phrase with a smile that made my heart beat faster. "Of course, I would like to spend these 2 days in bed with you. However, if we have a marathon like this, the first day of work will seem like hard labor. I'm sure that after such fitness, there won't be a single muscle left in the body that wouldn't whimper with pain and the slightest strain." At this point, Adriana burst into laughter. I had been allowing myself more and more of these kinds of jokes lately because they amused my woman. To be honest, I also liked them because I could say what I was thinking, immediately translating it into humor. The first day has passed. Ours was simply delightful. The sun was shining, there was a light breeze. We bathed in the river, sunbathed, ate delicious kebab, fresh vegetables. But the way we spent the night, I think, do not need to explain. In the morning, we woke up not from the fact that the pleasant sun rays hit us in the windows, but from the fact that a crazy downpour was drumming on the roof. Outside the window, thunder and lightning was shining. We hoped that such a mind-blowing spectacle would end soon. However, 2 o'clock later, everything was still as it was. We decided that we should leave back to the city, as the access to the recreation center was not paved with asphalt. The road was unpaved, which meant that with each passing hour the chances that we would not be able to leave increased. After quickly packing everything up, we jumped in my car and drove into town. There it was decided that we would stop at Adriana's house. However, just as we started pulling up to her driveway, her phone rang. and after a short conversation, she said that she needed to leave for work for a few hours. I was upset, but I decided that during her absence, I would have time to make dinner and clean up. I drove my lover to her place of work, and I went to her apartment. When I crossed the threshold of her house, I immediately realized that the children were not here. For a long time, the apartment had been cleaned. Everything sparkled with cleanliness. Such houses, as a rule, children do not live here. The first thing I did was to take a shower. I was there no more than 20 minutes. When I got out, I noticed someone was in the apartment. I carefully made my way across the room to the kitchen. The refrigerator was open behind the door. I couldn't see who was in there. However, I determined from the lower body that it was a woman. I didn't understand. "Uncle, who are you?" roughly inquired the guest. "You know, madam, I have the same question for you. Who are you? What are you doing here?" "Uncle, hello, this is my house. I don't remember bringing a handsome man like you here. But first of all, my name is David. Secondly, as I recall, this is Adriana's house. Of course you look a little like her, but you're not Anna. Of course I'm not Adriana. That woman whose name you mentioned, a lot of people call her my mother, but I wouldn't want her to think of herself as such." Gradually, the woman's tone began to loosen with each second. Her speech became more literate and sweet. She no longer seemed like the rude woman who stuck out from behind the refrigerator and tried to figure out who I was. She was a slender brunette with gorgeous clean hair. I wouldn't say her figure was slender. However, she was very appetizing. I caught myself thinking that I found this woman quite attractive. The fact that she called her mother threw me off. As far as I knew, my lover had only one daughter who had recently turned 4. The woman standing in front of me was at least 20. I could not believe that Adriana had kept from me the fact that she had another daughter. "So I didn't realize who you were. And when will my relative come home?" in a stern voice, the stranger asked. "Adriana and I are dating. She's been called into work for a few hours. I think she should be back by 3. Would you mind telling me your name so I'll at least know how to address you?" "Oh yeah, that's not very nice of me. My name is Kathy." "It's very nice to meet you, Kathy. I'm sorry to ask you this, but I'm really curious. Are you really Adriana's daughter?" "David, I see my mother has told me absolutely nothing about me." "Yes, that's so like her. For some reason, she always preferred to conceal my existence to her new acquaintances. Have you ever noticed that Adriana is a rather strange woman? You know, at one time I had a wild desire to show her to some psychiatrist or psychotherapist to assess her real adequacy. In part, I was a little relieved. I could finally get to know my favorite woman's family at least a little bit. Kathy seemed like a very pleasant, special person, despite the harsh language in her vocabulary. When I looked closer, I realized she looked a lot like her mother, practically a copy of her. The only thing missing was the loneliness on some parts of her body. Looking at her, I realized that Adriana had no shortage of admirers when she was young. "What are you doing here?" There was a shout. I turned around and saw my woman. Adriana's eyes were huge with surprise. One could guess that she didn't expect to see her daughter at home at all. "Mommy, hello. It's been a long time. How have I missed you?" Kathy clearly lacked acting talent, as her sarcastic grin made it clear that she was lying. "Stop putting on a show in my house. Why did you come here? Finish your business and get the hell out." "Adriana, why would you do that? I didn't realize you had a grown daughter who looks just like you. It's so beautiful. Let's all have tea together. If you want, I'll go and get Betty and everyone will be together." "David, have you met my daughter yet?" Kathy said with surprise. "Shut your mouth. Shut your fucking mouth. How dare you open it? Who the hell are you? Pack up and get out of here," shouted Adriana. Her scream was so exhausting that it made me feel scared for everyone around me. I thanked God that we didn't have the children with us right now. They wouldn't have been able to bear all that was going on right now. I tried to stay calm. However, one question did not want to leave my mind. "What is this?" "Betty, Kathy's daughter. But then why was Adriana talking about it being her daughter? What the hell is going on here? I can't stand the sound of women screaming since I was young. I'm constantly at a loss, not knowing what to say. While Adriana was screaming at Kathy, I started sobbing. I didn't know who to comfort. I tried to insert my own nonsense, but Adriana just kept screaming. I tried to raise my voice so she could hear me, but all my efforts were in vain. This went on for about 10 minutes until Kathy left the apartment. She was in such a hurry that she didn't bother to educate herself. She picked up her sneakers and ran out. Adriana yelled after her, saying she didn't understand why God had given her such a disgusting daughter. For what sins? At first I rushed towards my beloved, but she pushed me away, shouting. Her claims were unfounded. Adriana claimed I let Kathy into the apartment, but that wasn't true. The girl must have had keys because she was inside. While I was showering, Adriana was angry, not ready to dialogue, and my mind was still reeling with thoughts that Betty was not her daughter. To get some answers, I rushed after Kathy. I realized I probably wouldn't find her because it had been so long. She could have gone anywhere. But I decided to try and catch up with her. Running out of the entrance, I stopped. I had to decide which way Kathy ran. I wasn't the lucky type, so I had no hope at all of catching up with her. If you ran to the right, you could get onto a busy road with public transportation. If you go left, you can go into a quiet, cozy park. Just then, it seemed to me that a park or a public garden would be the perfect place to calm Kathy down, as the girl looked very saddened. It was unlikely that in such a state she would head anywhere on public transportation. The choice was made. I ran to the square. In 5 minutes I was there. There were not many people, as the weather was not very good. It was raining from time to time, but in the distance I could see several female silhouettes sitting on benches. I decided that one of them must definitely be Kathy. So as not to startle anyone, I began to walk down the alley at a measured pace. I was right. Near the beginning of the park, Kathy was sitting on a bench, crying quietly. I stopped a few meters away from her because I was trying to find the right words in my head to help her calm down. But the problem was that I didn't realize what words would have that effect. After all, I didn't know what was going on between her and her mother. And if Adriana didn't say anything about what was going on, then Kathy had to tell me everything. If I decided that I was going to be part of this family, then they should have no secrets from me. Kathy, God, how long have I been looking for you? To be honest, I didn't think I could catch up with you. I inhaled. At that moment, Kathy raised her head. I saw her crying. Puffy face. Tush smeared across her cheeks. I could see in her eyes that she was surprised to see me here. David, what are you doing here? Were you looking for me on purpose? Why would you want to do that? Kathy bombarded me with questions. Her facial expression radiated disbelief. I would like our relationship to be normal because I have grown to love her mother. Kathy, please don't be hostile to me. Try to understand me. I love your mother, but I had no idea she had such a grown-up daughter. I thought Betty was her child. Your screaming knocked me out of reality. If I'm going to have any chance of getting on with my life, I need to find out the truth. Please, please help me figure it out. Tell me everything I need to know. Kathy looked up at me, wiped her eyes with her hands, tears welling up and partying. She was confused. Probably didn't know where to start. The truth she told me about her mother hit me like a shoe on the head. I think the girl understood my condition, so she kept silent for a long time to find the right words. David, the only thing I can tell you is that you must get away from your mother. You have no idea what kind of person she is, what she's capable of. You don't know our history. Then I'll tell you. You may not realize it, but I'm only 20 years old. Betty is actually my daughter. A person who knows the elementary rules of math later guessed that when I gave birth to her, I was only 15 years old. I got pregnant, immediately ran to tell my mom about it. I knew it wasn't meant to be, But it just happened. There was nowhere to go. Adriana yelled at me, so the neighbors probably heard it. At first, she forced me to have an abortion. I wouldn't go along with it. We fought for days. But at some point, Adriana said she agreed with my opinion, and I would give birth. I was very happy about this turn of events, as I did not expect my mom to give up so quickly. A week later, we went to the doctor. He told me that I had some malfunctions in my body that needed to be eliminated and prescribed me a medicine. When we got home, my mom said that I would not take these pills. Replace them with herbs. I had nothing against it, as folk medicine and people use for many years. For 2 days I drank these decoctions. My condition only worsened. One day I went to visit one of the relatives on my father's line, told her about my well-being and the fact that I was drinking the decoction. When the relative found out what herbs my mother was talking to me about, she started screaming and demanded that I never drink them again in my life. As it turned out, my mother was trying to induce premature labor in me. You see, David and she didn't care about my baby, and she didn't care about me either. From that day on, I never came home again. She tried to look for me, but my aunt carefully helped to hide me. When the day of delivery came, I was taken to the hospital. Here, of course, we made a mistake. This is the only place where we give birth. Naturally, my mom was already there waiting for me. Or rather, she paid the doctors to notify her. I was admitted to the labor and delivery ward. It was a difficult labor. To be honest, I don't remember much. When I woke up, I was told that my baby had died harder, and the pain I had probably never experienced in my life. I didn't know where to go. I decided I would go to my mother. After I was discharged, I went home, but no one was waiting for me there. My mom had changed all the locks on the door. She opened the door a little and told me to get out. I, on the other hand, had been persistent in my day, and so I didn't give up and try to beg off. I could see that mom was nervous. After a while, I heard a child screaming in our apartment. When I tried to ask who was crying, my mom just pushed me away. I flew into the wall, and she shut the door. To say I was stunned is like saying nothing. I had no idea that Adriana would turn out to be such a cruel woman who was willing to kill her granddaughter and hurt her daughter. As it turned out, the horror was yet to come. Kathy continued to narrate. I think my eyes grew wider and wider with each word she spoke. As it turned out, Adriana had bribed the doctors at the maternity hospital to tell them that her daughter Kathy had been admitted. And so they did. While the girl was in the throes of labor and her mother was already in the hospital, discussing with the doctors the scam they had pulled in the end. When Kathy woke up, she was told that the baby had been stillborn. In fact, the staff had forged documents in which the girl supposedly gave up her daughter. Apparently, the guardianship and custody authorities were also involved, as the girl was easily given to her birth grandmother, who eventually became her mother according to the documents. I just could not understand what motivated Adriana to such a disgusting act. At first, it even appeared that she initially wanted to kill this child, and then she took it away from her own daughter. I couldn't believe that I had fallen in love with such a disgusting person. After all, Adriana seemed to me to always be empathetic and merciful. At some point, I felt completely all the pain Kathy was feeling at the moment. I came to the girl, embraced her. She reciprocated. Immediately, she buried her nose in my chest and started sobbing again. I'll repeat it forever. There is nothing more horrible in the world than the tears of a woman. When Kathy calmed down, we talked some more time. I needed to get to know this person as well as possible to understand how to help her. All the while my phone was ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't want to talk to her at the time, so I didn't pick up the phone. It turned out that Kathy had just started a business a year ago. She was helping women become more beautiful. In a small amount of time, she had built up a steady base of clients who signed up a month in advance to see her for manicures, pedicures, and eyelash extensions. Not so long ago, she did all these procedures alone. But now she has a small premises with offices where specialists of the highest qualification work. I began to ask Kathy if she had tried to get her daughter back. The girl told me that for the first year and a half she had been beating on all doors, telling me that she had been deceived, that she had not given up her child. However, no one believed her. The police did not want to deal with the case as they considered it unimportant. The child welfare authorities simply closed their doors in her face because her mother had paid them generously. I realized that I could probably help legally get Kathy her daughter Betty back. However, I began to think through all of my options. The fact of the matter is that I believe that Adriana unjustifiably deprived her daughter of her child. In fact, Kathy has done nothing wrong other than getting pregnant at 15. Kathy, please calm down. I believe you have been treated unfairly, to say the least, and I promise I'll help you if things work out. You'll be embracing your own daughter tonight. David, but how are you going to do that? It's impossible. She'll never let me see her in my life. You realize I only saw my daughter when I was peeping at them. I couldn't get any closer and I watched all the time at a distance of 5-7 meters. If Adriana noticed me, she would immediately grab Betty and run away. One day I tried to go up after her, but she started screaming, calling the police. People around me started looking at me, grabbing their kids. For some reason, everyone thought I was trying to steal the baby. I just wanted to be with my daughter, who was mine, not this grown woman who was called my mother. At that moment, Adriana called again. Like last time, I had no intention of picking up the phone. However, I realized that this was the only opportunity to return the child to his real mother's. When I answered the phone, Adriana bombarded me with hundreds of questions. Mostly she wanted to know why I ran away. What am I doing now? Why didn't I pick up the phone? I tried to explain that everything that was happening had stirred up a storm of emotions in me that I couldn't control. In addition, I decided that she needed to feel guilty. So I mentioned that I was offended by her rash actions and secrecy. Adriana began to tell me that it was all a very complicated story. She was ashamed to admit everything. After that, the woman began to tell her version of events. Her story was that Kathy robbed a store when she was 15 and got pregnant by some criminal mastermind. She knew nothing about her pregnancy at all. She was confronted just a week before she gave birth. The whole time the investigation was going on. When Kathy gave birth, she was sentenced to 5 years. Because of that, the girl had to give up the baby, and Adriana decided to take on the burden. So what you're saying is that Kathy spent those 4 years in prison. Am I understanding this correctly? I asked her mother that question in front of Kathy. Yeah, that's nice. And that's just the way it was. In all those years, she never once thought of her daughter. How could I trust her? This little miracle. I mean, she's gonna go back downhill. Nobody goes back to normal after prison. I saw real rage on Kathy's face. She was ready to explode. I tried with all my might to show her to keep quiet. The belt couldn't be aware of the fact that it was just the two of us now. If the girl made a single sound that Adriana's ears would pick up, my plan would fail. The girl was holding on from the last of her strength. Adriana tried to make peace with me. I told her that I could only meet her if she took Betty with her. She agreed. She said that as soon as she picked up the girl from the babysitter, she would call me right back. Right after that, I started telling Kathy about the plan that had been stuck in my head. I assured her that if everything went smoothly, she would have a daughter sitting in her arms in just a few hours. The girl had nowhere to go, so she agreed with everything I told her. Half an hour later, I received a call from Adriana saying that she had picked up Betty and was now ready to meet me. I set up a meeting at the park I was now at with Kathy. For about 20 minutes, the girl and I discussed where she would be. I gave her the keys to my car, which I had moved closer to the park entrance. When Adriana called, I left Kathy and went to meet my favorite girls. Adriana had a frustrated look on her face. However, the cheerful and upbeat Betty lifted my spirits a little. The girl was happily running towards me. I was surprised by this, as she had only seen me once in her life. However, according to Adriana, the little girl kept asking about me. Of course, I was very flattered by this. As soon as Adriana came closer to me, she immediately started making excuses and telling again her whole story, which of course I did not believe. I tried to make it look like I believed every word she said and asked questions. What surprised me the most was the fact that Betty knew that Adriana was not her real mother. She knew there was some Kathy girl who had given birth to her, abandoned her, then moved far away. I can probably understand why Adriana told her everything about the baby girl, because as she gets older, she will start to realize that Adriana is old enough to be her mother. About 15 minutes later, Adriana's car key fob started beeping. The sound of an alarm was heard from afar. The woman was very frightened that someone might have hit her because she had parked in the wrong place. That was a good thing for me. To be honest, I thought we'd have a longer chat with her. However, Kathy didn't hesitate and went straight to the other entrance where her mother's car was parked to make her yell. I told Adriana that I had no problem staying with Betty for a while the woman went to the car and made sure she was okay. She thanked me and immediately darted off in the direction of the unauthorized parking lot. As soon as Adriana was out of sight, I picked Betty up in my arms and ran the other way. All along the road, I prayed to God that Kathy would make it back to my car in that short time. Surprisingly, the little girl wasn't scared. She took it all as a game, and I tried to joke with her along the way so as not to make people suspicious. Out of the park, Kathy showed up from around the corner, unlocking my car as she walked. I opened the back door, put Betty in it, and jumped behind the wheel myself. Kathy ran over and got in the back seat too and gave me the keys. I started the car and we drove off to wherever the hell we were going. I didn't really know where we were going because now I'm a real criminal, but I'm only a criminal under the law. What was more important to me was the reunion between mother and daughter. All along the way, Kathy hugged Betty and sobbed so bitterly. It was as if what had happened to her 4 years ago had just recently happened to her. 10 minutes later, my phone started ringing off the hook with Adriana's calls. I didn't pick up the phone because I just didn't know what to say to her. I was bitter because I had loved her with all my heart, and she wasn't the person she claimed to be. When Kathy calmed down a little, she began to thank me. The words of her gratitude felt warm in my heart. At that moment, I thought that something could have worked out between us. After a little chatting with the girl, I decided that we would all go into hiding together. I decided that we need to go to my grandmother's house, which was located in 1,500 kilometers from my home. I inherited it, but I had never been there. All along the road, I sincerely hoped that the house was in good condition. It was in a remote village with only about 20 houses, but that didn't scare me. The main thing was that there would be internet, and I would be able to work remotely. Perhaps Adriana will have a conscience, and she will not go to the police and guardianship authorities. If she does, and we are found, then I will spend all my savings on the best lawyer I can find to help sort out this convoluted story. In the meantime, I will just hope that I have a happy and carefree life ahead of me, and Kathy and her beautiful daughter will be part of my family.